Hey, welcome, 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 one and all, to yet another episode of Whick TV, a cross ideological space where we come together to talk about issues serious and silly, cultural and political. Today, we are going to be talking about the Israeli Palestinian conflict. On October 7th was the deadliest day for Jews since the Holocaust. Hamas broke in to Israel and killed over 1,200 civilians, massacring them. Um, we're going to talk about the path forward, Israelis' response, Netanyahu, and the failure of intelligence. We're going to talk about the responses to this conflict, both from the Israeli and Palestinian side, as well as the international side. And we're going to talk about like the origins and maybe a path forward. There's a lot to get in here. There's a lot of there's a it's a heavy topic. So I just asked the people in my chat to try to be a little respectful of people who disagree with you. We're gonna be a little heavier handed on the moderation than we normally are. But yeah. Okay, and with that, I'm going to let my guests introduce themselves, give a brief, concise opening statement on their thoughts here, and we'll just go from there. And we're going to start with Ali. Go ahead, please. Who
Oh,
are
hey,
you?
how you doing,
What do
guys?
you think, etc.?
Yeah, so I'm just here to offer maybe a slightly different perspective. Something I have family that are overseas that are currently dealing with the situation. I've dealt with the situation a little bit personally. I am an American. I just want to be able to show that you can condemn like civilian violence while also still showing your support for Palestine. And just that showing support for one doesn't show support for the other. Um, but this is a serious topic. We should be able to discuss it, calmly. Don't want to make too many jokes and memes about it, but it's going to happen. But other than that, I'm just here for the discussion.
Well, thank you for being here, and thank you for being willing to come on and share your thoughts and stories and experiences. I'm very curious to see what you have to say. Counterpoints, what you got?
Yeah, so my name's Connor. I'm pretty centrist. I have pretty heavy sympathies on the right. I run a YouTube channel named Counterpoints 40K and Counterfire. I do political commentary. And what I would say is I probably land somewhere in there, but I think we can understand that through occupation and settlement, Israel is creating the conditions through which like Palestinians are, revolting. But I also don't think that we should ever condone or cheer on the events that have happened in the past like 72 hours. I also think that Hamas's goals are not going to be fulfilled unless their desire was suicide, because I think that the international community is basically going to support Israel effectively annexing Gaza, keeping it under military control for the next 20 or 30 years, if not deport everybody to the West Bank. So that's kind of where I'm at.
Okay, we'll get into it as we go. Dylan, what's your thoughts?
So I really feel like, especially on this platform, not especially on this platform, but on a lot of platforms on social media, but here as well, just seeing the initial statements come out, a lot of people showed their ass. A lot of people showed, I think, either some inner problems in their head or underlying bigotries that they're now revealing to the world. That is really disgusting. The first thing I want to say is, of course, no matter which side it is, you never deliberately target civilians in trying to paint civilians as criminals or trying to paint civilians as combatants or trying to tie them in some way to the state that allows you to target them and kill them is the tactics of some of the most brutal regimes in history, and is not a tactic you want to see repeated either by the Israeli government or by Hamas or Palestinian Islamic Jihad, Syrian Social National Party, or Hezbollah. Any of these parties, the IDF, Mossad, none of them can do that. And anybody tolerating that, in my opinion, sympathize with terrorist acts. And I think they should be either laughed out of the platform, laughed off the platforms that they display that type of dialogue, and completely boxed out of society. That's the first thing. The second thing is that Netanyahu's whole argument for being prime minister was just shattered. He, for the last decade, has made his case that he can manage the occupation. he can allow it to exist in perpetuity. And by making this the iron wall, quote unquote, that's what Benny Gantz called it, in the Gaza Strip, and upping the technology, they can make this conflict and the occupation able to be manageable forever. That is obviously not the case. The Israeli Mossad had a massive intelligence failure, and now, as Wick talked about, we have the deadliest day in Jewish history since the Holocaust. You should not want to manage this situation in perpetuity. You want to find a solution to the situation, one that allows everyone to live in coexistence in a general form of peace. No one has to love each other. No one needs to necessarily love everybody across the border, but people need to not kill each other. Kill everybody. You don't want to go. You want to have Hamas wanting to cross the border, or if they do try to cross the border and the occupation is over, the support amongst Palestinians is going to drastically go down. We saw with the ISW reporting, I think a few months before the Hamas crossed the border and did this operation, they were saying that 65% of Palestinians did not support breaking the ceasefire with Israel. There is not general support amongst the majority of Palestinians for the actions of Hamas. But the more slaughtering that continues within Gaza, the more you will push people to that solution. Just as the more terrorist attacks that are done in Israeli society, the same thing, contrary. But there needs to be a long-term solution to the issue, and I only see the end of the West Bank's occupation as that solution, and a long-term end to the blockade, as well as Iran stopping the funding of Hezbollah and Hamas.
We'll talk about if that's a realistic solution now as we go. Yeah, we'll get into it. Thank you for being here. Really appreciate you.
One last thing, I am also pretty sick, so if I'm more quiet today, that's why. I just wanted to
I understand.
say that.
I understand. All good. Loner.
Hey, I'm Lonerbox, video essayist and part-time streamer. I think this is probably the worst I've ever seen the internet. I had really hoped that people on the left, at least like the lower information ones, would maybe change their tune a bit now that they actually realize what Hamas is. And the result was the complete opposite. There are people supporting it. There are people simping for it. There are people trying to say that there are no Israeli civilians. So that's kind of gross. I'm also seeing a lot of otherwise fairly decent and liberal people trying to suddenly flipping over to the idea of glassing Gaza, of ethnically cleansing the population because they are, I guess, just too ungovernable. I think a lot of the polling data is maybe quite revealing. It seems to be the case that the overwhelming majority of Israelis are blaming Netanyahu for what happened. He is not a security leader anymore. He will never get that reputation again. He expanded the settlements. He stretched the IDF thin. His judicial reforms led to a lot of dissent within Israel, and that led to the IDF being kind of short on staff. I think he admitted in 2019 that he was okay with allowing Qatari funds to enter Gaza, knowing that it would go to Hamas because Hamas would counterweight the PLO, the PA. He wanted that because he has never wanted peace. He has never supported a Palestinian state. He has actually led protests against it since the 90s, very vicious protests. And obviously Hamas are the same. They don't want peace. They want to obliterate Israel and free Palestine of all the Jews. So I think these guys need to go. What happens after this with this siege on Gaza and following, I have no idea. But I would maybe advise people that maybe just because you don't have a solution immediately, I'm hearing a lot of like ethical ethnic cleansing proposals or ethical apartheid proposals, usually at the expense of Palestinians. I feel like if you don't know, you should just say you don't know. It's okay. But yeah, we'll see where it goes.
We will see where it goes. Thank you for being here, Loner. I really appreciate you, and yeah, we'll see what goes on going forward. Omar, what do you got?
Hello, everyone. My name is Omar. I'm from the Third Rail. I'm an Arab American, and I live in New York. My view is different. How does a people who are under oppression, under occupation for 75 years and 56 years, their land is sealed? How do you fight? Who's a terrorist and who's a freedom fighter? If the Jewish underground from 1938 to 1948 blew up hotels, blew up the King David Hotel, blew up civilian facilities to get the British out of then Palestine, were they freedom fighters or were they terrorists? Now, what you have here in Palestine is There is only 22% left. What's the original Palestine? The Israelis are not sure what they want from the Palestinian. They don't want the two-state solution because they're building settlements on Palestinian land, almost 700,000 since the peace process started. And they don't want the two-state solution, and they don't want the one-state solution because they fear they're going to be a minority in a Jewish state. So what is the objective of Israel? What does Israel want? Forget about what Hamas wants. What the Palestine. We want to know, what does the Jewish state wants? Do you want the one-state solution, live under one state, under constitution and democracy, or do you want the two-state solution that was supposed to happen from the peace process? But you're building settlements every day. You have people who come from Brooklyn, from Canada, from New York. They read something in the Torah or whatever. They said they have to go and live in the land of Moses, and they kicked the Palestinian out, and they are colonializing the land, kicking them off their land, have settlement. If you go to the West Bank, forget about Gaza. You have these Jewish settlements that are caved in by walls. They have their own roads. They have 80% of the water sources. They have everything, while the Palestinians are living in ghettos, which is a remnants what the Jewish went through in Poland when they were living in ghettos in Europe. What happened to the Jews in Europe, they put it into practice toward the Palestinian. Now, why did Hamas react why did Hamas pick the October day of 7? Give me some time, guys. 50 years
Briefly,
ago.
we do have to get
Okay,
to...
I'm sorry. Okay, 50 years ago, on October 6th, Egypt declared war on Israel on the Yom Kippur War. Why did Egypt do it? Because Egypt, Sinai was under occupation. Nobody was negotiating with the Egyptian. So the Egyptians said, if we hurt the Israeli army and show them that we're still here, they'll be able to negotiate. That was the only thing. That was a cry for help. When they came out the border, okay, the Jewish state is making peace with all the Arab countries, but they're not making peace with the people they have issue with, the Palestinian, their neighbors. This is the problem. And everybody knows that Netanyahu is a war criminal. He helped fund Hamas. Hamas is funded by the Israeli government. Go look it up. I'm not saying, you have to just Google it. It was funded and strengthened in order
Last
okay.
statement, because we got to get it.
All right, go. We're gonna go. When we go into the show, we're gonna go through that. We're gonna show you how Hamas was funded and strengthened by Netanyahu, and we have Netanyahu on record saying that the only way to thwart Palestinian state is to string Hamas against the Palestinian Authority. Go ahead.
Okay, Stardust, welcome. Brief, concise opening statement. Then I want to get to the actual meat of this. I want to get to the discussion. So go ahead.
Okay. So just to, I guess, give my perspective on this, I am pro-Palestine, but I'm very middle ground. I don't think that it is fair to expect people after 70 years of this conflict who live in Israel to just move away, because all they know is Israel is their home. I don't think that what's happening to the Palestinians in Gaza, or really the West Bank, is particularly fair or nice. And obviously, very bad conditions. However, the attacks by Hamas have been completely unjustified and completely atrocious, to be quite frank. And I'm not quite sure what the solution is in this situation. I used to be like pro two state. I'm not sure if that's even possible. I think, even if they had maybe started Israel, and I know this is not what the Israelis wanted initially, but if they had made Israel like initially like maybe a secular nation founded upon Jewish values, and maybe like integrated Palestinians, I don't know if that would be something that they could do. It's definitely not something they can do today, because it would just result in massive bloodshed. So yeah, that's kind of like my stance on this whole thing. So yeah,
we'll get into it. I guess my first question, because I've heard this a couple times, right? Lonerbox mentioned it. Like, the only way to end this is to end the occupation of Gaza. After the Hamas attacks, do we think that's a reasonable thing anymore? I mean, how do we convince the Israeli people to let the people of Gaza out when they saw what happens when you let the people of Gaza out, right? Like,
is that a question to everybody,
really
or
to everyone?
Well, they didn't
This
let
is
them out, they
open,
forced
like the
themselves
open
out, right?
discussion, right?
Was that really letting them out so much as Hamas really taking it upon themselves to, break in and commit horrible crimes? I don't know if that's really letting them out, right? Again, the Palestinians are in between a rock and a hard place, right? You've got Hamas on one side, who is also tied in with a lot of infrastructure in Palestine. And then you've got Israel on the other side, who, frankly, for good reason, probably doesn't want like much to do with that because Hamas is involved, right? And even if you look at surrounding Middle Eastern countries, they in general have a pretty low um, uh, a low opinion of Hamas as well. So yeah.
I mean,
I'm just saying, no one's seriously expecting Israel to just lift the blockade on Gaza anytime soon. What people might be expecting is that if they go in there and actually do weaken Hamas to the point that they can't govern anymore, you can look at polls again. Even there was a poll done in July this year that the majority of Gazans were not happy with Hamas. Hamas were losing popularity. That's actually one of the reasons they might have done this, was to gain support. It seems that 70% of them actually wanted the PA to send officials and security to administrate back there again. So if it's possible to, one potential future could be that, like, if Hamas are out of the way and PA can come back to Gaza, then there can actually be room for a negotiating party across the West Bank and Gaza, because that split has been what's hurt the Palestinian cause for so long. And then it would also mean someone more reasonable has to lead Israel as well. But I don't, unless anyone's saying that Israel should just go in there and lift the wall on the blockade like tomorrow.
what
Mas,
what confuses me a little bit about this is the government on the ground in the West Bank, at least for the areas that are not occupied, is Fatah controlled territory. It's not controlled by Hamas. And so, talking about ending the occupation in the West Bank, if that deal was made between Fatah and Israel, or they were able to come to some compromise, or some other party besides Hamas was able to come to some compromise, whether it be the PLO or whatever it would be, I feel like that would be something that could really undercut Hamas's argument that the Jews need to be basically pushed into the sea for there to ever be peace, for Palestinians to ever live in peace, for them to ever have a thriving society. But I also don't think the Israeli government is going to be willing to make those compromises, because the Israeli government is dominated by far-right lunatics like Benjamin Netanyahu, who's got fascists like Ben Gvir whispering in his ear.
okay. The whole idea is the question is not whether Israel will give Gaza the right to a free state. It's the only choice they have. Down here, he talked about FET, who control the West Bank. You know that the Israeli government hasn't spoke to them since 2014. The reason they strengthened Hamas was so they could weaken Fatah. So they wanted to create the idea of the divide and conquer. Hamas was just a social organization that used to give food and medication to people. Then it became a political movement. And then was deliberately strengthened by Israel, and Israel let it grow. You think Israel would let a movement like that grow to this point if they didn't benefit from them as being to divide the Palestinians? Israel has a dilemma. They want the land, but there's a problem. There's people living on that land. These are not native Indians who are running around chasing buffalo. These are people with a modern state. What do you do with 7 million Palestinians? You can't get rid of them. Even when Netanyahu said, well, you guys should leave Gaza before we come in. His whole idea was so they could leave to Egypt and become refugees in Egypt and never come back. It's all about ethnic cleansing. The state of Israel the state of Israel has been ethnically cleansing the Palestinians for 75 years. There's no other choice about it. The only solution is not complex, it's not complicated. There's a problem. Just give the Palestinian their state under the 1967 borders. Case closed. And you could build a wall from all the way to the sky, and you could close the Palestinians off in their own country. Then, if they violate that wall, then we're all going to be against the Palestinians. But to seal Gaza and deprive them even of construction materials for 16 years, the people who are fighting today with Hamas were not even born yet when Gaza was sealed. Gaza is an open air prison, according to the United Nations, according to Israeli ex-intelligence chief, according to Beit Salam, a Jewish organization, according to Amnesty International, according to Human Rights Watch. Israel is an apartheid state. It is moving toward an apartheid state. They're making new laws. Okay. Even inside Israel, they're making laws to make Israel a Jewish state and to compromise the 20% of Israeli Arabs who are citizens of Israel and recognize Israel as their state. It's a problem. It's a dilemma. What do you want? One state solution? two-state solution, or do you want a Holocaust of the Palestinians?
What do we do with the people, even if we did that, right? Even if we went back to the 1967 borders, what do you do with the people who were born, the Israelis who were born on the land that compromises those borders, right?
I mean, the same thing you've been doing to the Palestinians that were born on the land, move them out and put them back in the place that is theirs, right?
Is that what you want to happen?
No, Whick,
I mean,
Whick,
so like,
okay.
personally, I would love for like a one-state solution under Palestine. That's not going to happen. I have to live in a world of reality, right? So the only reality I see forward is a two-state solution, to which case, yes, the Israelis would have their own land and the Palestinians would have their own land. They'd have to live in peace. But then that would mean that the Israelis would have to go back to the land that is deemed theirs, and the Palestinians can have their land back. Yeah.
Very simple.
You want to remove
what's that
500,000
border?
settlers from? You're saying you want to move 500,000 settlers from the West Bank?
I mean, didn't they move the people, the original people, out of there? So, like, yeah, the same 500,000.
I'm asking you if two wrongs.
Displaced.
Well, the people in West Bank didn't do that, right? Their ancestors did that. So
what are you talking about? It's only 30 years since the last 30 years these settlers came. Most of these settlers are not even Israeli citizens. They're American citizens, Canadian citizens. They're not even Israelis. They're Jewish fanatics who came from all over the world to settle the promised land. They're not even Israeli citizens.
My understanding of when it comes to arrangements with settlements, I don't think any serious actor is saying that 500,000 settlers can be cleared out of the West Bank. I think what tends to happen in these peace talks is that they negotiate a land swap, right?
Well, listen, the peace process.
Am I wrong about that? Like,
no, hold on. The peace process started in 1989. That's almost 40 years ago. It hasn't gotten the Palestinian anything, and you're wondering why they're fighting back, why they're becoming violent, what do you want them to do? To lay down?
Has nothing to do with what I asked you. I thought that serious actors, when it comes to negotiating a two-state solution, tend to talk about land swaps rather than trying to force out 500,000 people.
Well, I have an idea.
Because Israel never agrees to removing 500,000 people from the West Bank, right?
I have an idea. These Jews could live under a Palestinian state. That's it.
I'm not sure Palestinians want them. I'm not sure Israelis want them there.
No, they're gonna want it. No problem. We have no issue. We live with the Jews.
I don't even think.
Hold on. We live with the Jews for thousands of years. Arabia was the place that saved the Jewish people from the Inquisition, from the European program. We lived together in perfect harmony, neighbors in Yemen and Egypt.
Nothing ever happened that was bad.
Yeah, but then they were all expelled in the early 20th century.
They were not expelled. They were called to the promised land. I'm from Yemen.
No, a lot of them were expelled.
I'm from Yemen. We had the largest Jewish people living in our country. We lived in peace, no problem. We still have land there. Nobody even
Why do you think the Jews all chose to leave Yemen?
Because they wanted to create the Jews had a dilemma.
At the same time.
Yeah, they had a land. They had a land, but they had no people to fill it. Half the Yemeni kids were kidnapped when they went to Israel. I want people to Google Yemeni children kidnapped by the Israeli authorities. They stole the kids. The Yemeni kids were Jewish because they don't look like the European. What are you talking about? We lived in perfect harmony. There's no issue with the Jewish people. There would never be. We believe in the same thing. We believe most of our religion comes from Jews.
Do you think it's a bit of a coincidence that the Yemeni population got out of Yemen in 1950, like a year after a blood libel case?
I don't know what you're talking about. It was called Operation Magic Carpet.
But a year before Operation Magic Carpet, there was a blood libel case. It's not a surprise that Jewish people would probably want to leave and go somewhere. It's not like the average person gets offered to go to a different state where their ethnic group is just for a change of scenery and they all say yes. They had the option to stay. They chose not to because there was a lot of anti-Semitism. They were not living in peace and harmony. There were pogroms in Aden in the 40s.
Program? Where the program? You lost your head or what? I'm telling you, from Yemen. There's still Jews in Yemen.
After the partition vote, there was a pogrom where 82 Jewish people died.
That's in Europe. That's a European thing. Your European.
Do you think pogroms didn't happen in the Middle East, in Iraq, Algeria,
Never.
Yemen?
They lived in perfect harmony.
Okay, so you're not engaging.
The biggest merchant in the Islamic Empire of the Ottoman
you gotta let other people respond.
It's okay. You've lost it. Yeah. Okay. You've lost us. It's fine.
Let's let Dylan, if you want to try, you may, and if Counterpoints wants to go.
Let's have a sleep today. Go ahead, Dylan.
I mean, this is kind of bizarre. How is it that all these different Arab nations invaded Israel multiple times, attacked Israel multiple times. Putting aside the morality or the geopolitics behind these wars, do you think during that period, if you were a Jew living in those countries, you'd be able to live in that country peacefully with your compatriots, and that there would be no violence directed towards you? Or if like Jews would be able to like freely move to like Baathist Iraq?
Can I answer it, please, quick and fast?
Sure.
The Jewish population in Egypt, Mossad used to bomb theaters, movie theaters where Jews used to go in order to scare them to go back to Israel. Look it up. I'm not
You
making this stuff
completely
up.
avoided my question
No,
entirely.
I'm telling you, because they never left
Do you
on
think that
purpose.
the Israel just
And
scared all the
first of
Jews
all,
into
okay,
coming to Israel, and there was no
okay,
like anti-Semitism in the
hold
region
on.
whatsoever?
Let's talk about the wars. You said the Arabs attacked Israel. In 1956, Israel attacked Egypt.
I'm
With
not asking
hold
about the
on.
geopolitics. I'm asking about the
You said there's
environment
war.
for Jews,
You
for human
made a
beings
claim.
living in these countries.
Hold on. Let's address the claim of the war. You said these Arab
They did invade Israel, or they tried to invade Israel. They failed.
Let me tell you that the 1956 France and England attacked Egypt. Israel joined in. 1967, Israel did a surprise attack on Egypt. The only war that was started by the Arabs was in 1973. 1948, you can't count them. Most of the Arab armies were under British generals. They were under the colonial rule. There was no Arab country. The only Arab country was Egypt that was probably
I mean,
independent.
the problem is that you're denying Arab attacks on Jews, like you're denying pogroms
was
in
no
Yemen
attack.
and
Give
in
me
Iraq.
some
Do you think
documentation.
was the Hebron massacre real? 1929.
Yeah, 1920, of course, it was instigated by the British. Yeah, of course. That's inside
The
Palestine.
Hebron, yeah. So the Hebron massacre, that was real, right?
Yeah, it was
the killing of
yeah,
Jews,
but you're
right?
talking
Yeah,
about the
okay.
whole. That was
Why do
inside
you think that's real, but you don't think the pogroms in Yemen are real?
Because
Okay,
it was
they were
instigated
right
by the
after-
British.
They
Because
were
there was
right
no-
after the UN partition, so you can
No,
just
the
say it was a
night-
reaction, but like, it
Okay,
did happen.
did the Jewish and Palestine fought together against the British? Didn't they fight together?
I'm not asking you about that. I'm asking you
I'm asking-
about the
no, you
pogroms
want
in
to avoid
Yemen.
this. There is no program in Yemen. I don't know
Okay,
what you're talking
we're
about.
looping.
What are you talking about? Can
Well,
you give us some
let's reset a little bit. Let's
give us
reset a
some
little bit.
proof?
Let's reset a
Can you
little
give us
bit.
Yeah, sure.
No, let him give us
Reset.
some proof.
No,
They make things up as they go. Oh, 40 children were beheaded. 40 babies. All, It
Okay.
was all a lie.
I guess
Stop
I'll
lying.
start
I've
with
never
it.
said 40 children were beheaded, but
Stop
I'll get
lying. You are
else.
liars. I'm from Yemen.
What are
We
you
have
talking
Yemeni neighbors.
about?
Huh?
Nobody brought up the babies. You're rambling at no one.
Yeah, and
Because
we
this is
didn't
the
bring up the babies at
propagandist.
all.
He's saying there's a
Loner
program.
Box has not said anything about dead
Can you give
babies.
me-
You're the
Anyway,
one
can you-
bringing up dead babies.
Coming
man.
back to the original point about borders, I feel like the outposts probably need to go. They're small enough that they can go. There are settlements that are small enough to go. But I think generally, I don't think there's ever been like a major, like the big sticking point when it comes to peace negotiations in the past has not generally been the borders. It's usually been like Jerusalem or right of return or security, right? I don't think you need to like advocate for deporting 500,000 settlers because that's
Do you think
kind of
Palestinians
difficult, right?
should Palestine have the right to return to their homes?
I think it should be recognized. Its implementation will have to be negotiated. Yeah.
On what terms? On what terms?
I don't think there should be any lid on it. I don't believe in symbolic right of return. I believe that it'll probably be easier for people to move to West Bank and Gaza, to a Palestinian state, because that's probably where they'll want to go. As for ones in Israel, I think Israel is obligated to allow them to return. But I also think I would go with Arafat's proposal from Camp David, where he was willing to acknowledge Israel's demographic concerns because they would never have it otherwise. And there can be reparations and repatriation in exchange instead for
Can you
those ones.
can you vision a one state solution? I think that's the best solution, honestly.
From now,
With the demographic concerns that
I
he just
feel
said.
so.
This is the
I
problem.
tend not to. So I tend
This is
to
the
not to
problem.
go with. So I mean, ideologically, the idea of a binational one state is that's what I'd prefer. But I'm also going to acknowledge that there has to be like a million different things that would have to happen between now and then. I can't even in a world where there's not been a peace process for 20 years. If we're saying one state solution, the amount of things that happen in between then, that's already unpredictable. So even like, I think bickering over 1 and 2 state solution is kind of like ridiculous. I think right now
we're getting into the weeds. We're getting into the weeds, and I want to kind of reset this. I guess I'll start by asking some simple questions, right? Does anyone think that what Israel, Netanyahu, is doing now to Gaza in retaliation for these attacks is justified? And if not, what would you have them do instead? Nothing? How does Hamas need to go? Yes or no?
Yeah,
it's not justified. it's not justified, but it seems to be that this is like how the rules of engagement happen over there. We keep trying to claim like one side is terrorists and the other side is non-terrorists or defenders, when that's just simply not the case. People on the ground that are Palestinians, Arab, whatever you want to see Israel, the Israeli government and the IDF as terrorists just as much as the Israelis see Hamas as terrorism.
Yeah.
So, like, can they not retaliate? No, they're going to retaliate. Is it justified? I mean, at this point, I honestly don't like the argument of whether or not like terrorism is justified. That's just what happens over there. So you just pick a side at this point.
Yeah, so there's this quote, just so I can jump in for a minute. We keep talking about like just or moral or correct or right versus what's going to happen. And so basically, like, there's this quote from like the Athenians or whatever. It's like the weak tolerate what they must and the strong do as they will. And that's basically what's going to happen. So as far as I'm concerned, I think that you said 1,100 dead Israeli civilians. I think that this is going to be their miniature 9/11. I think they're going to be saying never forget, the same way that Americans said never forget about 9/11. I think this will justify the next like 2 to 3 decades of policy. I think at minimum, you're looking at a military occupation of Gaza. I think you're seeing the prohibition of Hamas. I think you're seeing anybody who associates with Hamas being hunted and killed. I think you're probably seeing the military occupation for the next 20 or 30 years, and how much they decide to do nation building, where they actually build up infrastructure and a civilian government and all that kind of stuff, is going to be dependent on the relationships that are born of that conflict. And then finally, like I said, like I wouldn't be surprised if they straight up ethnically cleansed it. And that's kind of like, it's weird because the empowered man and I, we almost agree that the goal is like Israel tried to back the Palestinians into an impossible corner, so they would lash out in a certain way, so they would have a moral pretext to do what they want. And that, I mean, you can describe it that way, but now Israel has the pretext. So what you want kind of doesn't matter.
I also don't like the framing of the question, like how can Israel not retaliate? Because when people say that the Palestinians are retaliating for the years of oppression that happened, everyone goes, well, that was the past. This is something that happened now, blah, blah, blah. Okay. But then when we talk about Israeli retaliation, it's all willy-nilly. So I just don't like that idea either.
Well,
Can I suggest
I
a more meaningful question? Rick?
I know. Ask the question.
Look,
What's the ratio? Hold
Omar,
on, Edward,
stop,
1 second.
please. Stop.
Okay, I just want to ask the question.
I understand, but this idea that this question is meaningless. I don't think it's I don't think that's true, and I want to push back on that for a moment.
You don't know what I'm going to suggest, though.
I don't know what you're going to suggest.
So I don't have to.
You can go ahead.
Okay,
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
going to
yeah.
say that as far as what we want with that, I feel like it's inevitable that there's going to be a ground invasion, that they're probably not going to stop until Hamas is gone because they don't want a repeat of 2006 in Lebanon. It's what happens after that. And what I think happens after that, and what is needed to happen for a really long fucking time, is that Israel cannot do this by themselves. They can't just have progressives like holding their hands and expecting them to someday vote in like a leader who actually is committed to peace, like a new Rabin or something like that. They're not going to do it. I think if Israel occupies the West Bank, which they most likely will, I think it's on the rest of the world, like the rest of Israel's allies.
UN?
To
Are we
start
talking
saying,
NATO? Are we talking America?
UN,
what are we talking?
UN, mostly United States, European partners as well, to say that like what the way you've done things has not worked. What we need is for you to actually like to have a serious commitment to peace, or we're fucking you off. Like I think it has to come from the rest of the world. It can't just come from Israel. Like we can't expect.
I actually really agree with that. I think America needs to like really step up and make that a requirement.
So
going
by
forward.
requirement, just so I can get some clarity here, when you say that they're going to fuck off, what do you mean by that? If
I'll give you a more practical one. Like, so say every time there's a UN vote on settlements, you've got like 190 countries condemning, and then Israel and America abstain or vote no, right? I think America can probably turn its back on Israel on those votes, right?
why would this happen? You keep saying should, but why would this happen now of all times?
Because look what Israel has done with
Washington.
settlements. They have stretched their military thin. They're causing more problems for themselves. Israel is literally like digging its own grave by expanding those settlements into the West Bank. Like, you realize that, right?
Washington is on the
No.
You
Washington's
don't think
under
Israel's doing its own great by
Omar,
expanding
hold on. I
settlements?
want to hear from Counterpoints and Lunderbox for a minute. Go ahead.
Okay.
No, I don't. They activated 300,000 troops. I don't think there's a competent military in the Middle East that could take on the Israeli military technologically. And even if they tried, the United States would back Israel, not their opponents. So, to
I
act
don't think you know what my question is.
well, no, I kind of, you can re-explain it to me, and I'll be happy to listen again.
Okay.
Again, this is falling under should versus what's going to, and like I'm okay with listening to moral arguments. As a matter of fact, I'll listen to them all fucking night if we need to. But like what I heard is there's probably going to be I think it's guaranteed at minimum there's a military occupation of Gaza. I think we're all probably on the same page with that. You're saying that it's possible that there's going to be a military occupation of the West Bank, where they're going to use this as a pretext to say, we can't let Palestinians manage their own affairs because when they do, they're going to create shit and then eventually they're going to come kill us. They'll use it as a pretext for the West Bank. And you're saying the international community needs to come together and say, whatever you're doing is not working, so we need to have some political influence on this project. I am saying that the United States and Israeli political momentum is never going to allow the international community to coherently govern the West Bank.
First of all,
wait, that's okay. I didn't say Israel was going to militarily occupy the whole of the West Bank, nor did I say that the international community should take it over themselves. I said
I'm listening.
that there should be a bit more, because right now, when it comes to something like settlements, I think it's a really obvious one, is Israel expands settlements into the West Bank. Half of Israelis don't want them to do that. No Palestinian wants them to do that. The American government wags their finger and says, this is a huge obstacle to peace, and then they just do it and they vote with them in the UN. I think at least withdrawing that support in the UN votes on settlements, that's a start. That's a really obvious thing that America should be doing that they're not.
What do you think the chances of that happening are?
Of
the United States doing what you suggested?
Okay, so just for that one thing, there's been some indication before now that Biden has been a lot less vocally supportive of Israel than previous presidents. That seems to have been the case, and Netanyahu's been quite frustrated by that. That's changed now, but and the reason for that is because for the last 2 years, more Democrat voters have been supportive of Palestinians than Israelis. That's never happened before. I don't think we're that far away from seeing like a shift in narrative that just at least condemns settlements in the UN. That's just like one really obvious thing.
After this event, do you think that trajectory is going to continue?
No, but well, it depends on what happens to Gaza, right? Like, because I don't know what the fuck Israel's going to do to Gaza that might like set their popularity back. And again, Netanyahu is taking the blame for this, and he is the settlements guy, right? So,
first of all, I think Washington is under occupation by Israel. That's the first thing. Once we free Washington from the occupation,
oh God.
Hold on. It is under occupation by AIPAC and the lobbyists and money. We got your back. Instead of sending diplomat to stop the war, to stop the violence, they send a carrier to fight people on gliders. I don't send first. We need to free Washington from the occupation, from the Israeli lobbyist occupation. Once we free the legislative branch, then we go to the executive branch and we free them. Then they could act within the creed that America was made, that the right for people to live and pursue happiness. Right now, Washington is acting like a gang. We got your back. What kind of conversation? What kind of we got your back? You got your back so they could go kill the Palestinian women and children. Hamas is not Gaza. Hamas is just an organization that you built, that you gave money to, and you go Google it. And you that in order.
Omar, does Hamas need to be removed? Let's start there.
Of course, they need. There won't be no Hamas if there was a free country. There would not be Hamas. What resistant organization? They're not born out of thin air because they hate people. They are born out of necessity, like anything else. Like if you go.
So if you freed Gaza, Hamas would go away. Is your position?
Well, they be part of the government. They be about. They go and they get elected like every other government. They don't have no reason to be unarmed against Israel if Israel is already within its borders. Then it'll be an act of war if they are to attack Israel after Israel withdraws from the Palestinian territory. Right now, Hamas is part of the resistance. You want to call it a terrorist? You can call it. Washington lists anybody that they don't like as a terrorist organization just to please the lobbyists in Israel.
Do you think it's fair to
Lieutenant-
call Hamas a terrorist organization after what they
I
did?
don't think it's fair. They already killed 2,300 from last night. 6 days, Israel has killed 2,300 Palestinians. I got the numbers right here: 463 children and 300 women. So, who's the terrorist here? Come
Do you
on,
think
Take
the,
this?
do you
that's
think, do you
state
think the
terrorism.
nature of those
That
attacks
is
are the
state
same?
terrorism. Israel has been committing crime against the Palestinians for 75 years. In 2014, they killed 2,100 Palestinians, 561 children, and 300 women. Nobody even batted an eye, because you know why? Because those are Arabs. They're worthless. They're Palestinians. They don't worth nothing. But a Jew.
Can
Let's
I?
see that. Okay, hold on. Let's do the ratio.
Mhm.
How much is one Palestinian worth to one killed Israeli? Can we give you 100 to 1? Okay, we'll kill
It's
100
probably
Palestinians.
3.
Oh, yeah, no, we'll
So
kill no, just to please the media and have you
yeah,
guys
Counterpoint.
I'm
react.
saying if
Wait,
you look
wait,
at the
can I-
casualty
For
stats,
every,
it's
for every
3.
Israeli,
Can I?
Can I dissect this
for
for a
every
moment?
Israeli, hold on, let me finish. For every Israeli is killed, we're gonna give
Briefly,
you
then
100
we got to get counterpoints in.
No,
Go
hold
ahead.
on. I'm going to go to Gaza, me. For every Israeli that was killed, I'm going to kill 100 Palestinians just to make it even. What's the ratio here? I mean, certain lives are worth more than others. Are we the children of God, all of us?
Okay,
Come on,
so
people.
I want
Either
to.
give them
Yep.
liberty or give them death. That's it. Give them their freedom, man.
Counterpoints. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. So I want to describe this because basically, I don't like that I have to handhold people through like military Western morality or whatever, but I guess we have to do it. Okay. So what I would say is, up until the early 20th century, civilians were considered a part of the like normal targets for war. So if you had like a civilian center that was supporting a nation during conflict, you were allowed to target them. So we did carpet bombing. That was very normal up until the 1940s. Also, it was very normal to have the sacking of cities after conflicts where people would get raped and murdered and executed and thrown in mass graves and all that kind of stuff. Since the 1940s, we have developed technologies like in the 1950s during the Korean War in the 19, although that's actually an example of us using the old system where we effectively killed a third of North Korea using strategic bombing. Okay.
Yeah.
So we just killed the fuck out of everybody, right? In the 1970s, the United States and most Western powers developed precision bombing, and they also developed a moral system in which they didn't want to consider civilians as legitimate targets anymore. So since that point, what's happened is the Western world and the developed world have said that the only combat that should be taking effect is between combatants, people who are armed and actively participating in combat. So and this is also something that like came out of World War II because the desolation of, Europe was so bad that we decided that it was immoral to just target civilians for fun. So right now what you have is you're telling me that an airstrike let's use an apartment building as an example. There's a Hamas base in an apartment building. They do the knock on the roof. They set off an explosive. They say, escape the building or whatever. They airstrike it, and then that kills like 30 people or whatever, right? You're saying that's the same as Hamas taking armed riflemen, going door to door, and shooting people in the face. For
don't have
Western,
You have no
I
proof
No,
mean,
of that.
counterpoints. Finish your thoughts, and then he can
I saw the
respond.
Yeah.
videos, Counterpoint. I saw the videos in Arabic. I'm gonna explain to you. Go ahead.
okay, yeah. So, to finish the point,
Yeah.
shooting children and women in the face intentionally as a part of your policy is different than airstriking a military target and there being collateral damage. At least in the Western world, it is. And here's the thing: before you present your evidence, I'll be happy to listen to it, but frankly, I get a little frustrated with your perspectives. If I see civilian houses with 5 body bags in blood inside the room, I'm assuming the people inside the house got executed. So that's the evidence that I'm looking at. And then here's another thing. Hold on, because you brought up this argument multiple times, so I want to preempt it. Every single time that an Arab has killed somebody, you have said that's because of the British mandate, or that's because of Israel, or that's because of the United States, or that's because of the geopolitics. Well, when do Arabs actually have responsibility for the guns that they're shooting into other people? As an example, in Iraq, was it the United States' fault that the Shiite and Sunni militias were killing the shit out of each other?
Yeah.
Or was it Shiite and Sunni militias that were killing the shit out of each other?
Yeah, it's the United States' fault because we destroyed.
Oh, okay. So when
Okay, wait a
Arabs
minute,
kill
wait a
each
minute.
other, it's not their responsibility.
But,
That's what I'm hearing.
I'm going to tell you why, because I hate when people
Sure.
compare 600,000 Iraqi babies. No, but Saddam Hussein killed 5,000. Hold on, because we went in Iraq,
Sure.
we destroyed the infrastructure of Iraq. What is that? We got rid of the army, rid of the police, and created mayhem. There was no killing before you guys came there for the American
That's fucking
crime.
insane.
That's
Okay,
no.
can I-
Shias and Sunnis
Iraq
have
was
been-
under
Dylan, go
Saddam
for it,
Sunni have
Hussein.
been
Dylan,
fighting
then start
for-
us.
That's a fucking
Okay,
insane
so
statement.
Dylan, then start
I got a
us.
few things I got to say. So the first thing is, Hamas 100% was murdering civilians in southern Israel. It's not up for debate. It's an unquestionable truth that they were doing that, and it's
Well,
not that
criminal.
surprising. Article 7 of Hamas's charter states, the day of judgment will not come until Muslims fight Jews and kill them. Then the Jews will hide behind rocks and trees, and the rocks and trees will cry out, "Oh Muslim, there is a Jew hiding behind me. Come and
There
kill
we
him."
go, there
These
we
aren't
go.
the fucking Boy Scout troop. They
Dylan,
said what they were gonna
Dylan,
do, then they go into southern Israel and
Dylan,
kill them.
Dylan,
If the Russians
Dylan.
said, "Hey, we're gonna go kill civilians," and they go out and kill civilians, no one would be
Dylan,
surprised.
do you
Hamas
think,
does it, no one should be surprised. That's
why
the
do you
first
so-
thing.
Dylan,
Hey,
No,
Omar,
let
you
Dylan
talk a
finish.
lot.
Yeah.
It's my time to
I
talk.
would love
you
to.
just say
Second
all
thing
this
is,
guy.
Saddam Hussein killed hundreds of thousands of his own people, started
Lie.
a fruitless invasion of Iran
Lie.
that was bound to fail, killed hundreds
Lie.
of thousands of more people,
Bullshit.
genocided the Kurds, invaded
Bullshit.
Iraq, causing an international oil crisis because he
Invaded
wanted
Iraq?
to loot the country and execute
Wait.
the locals. He was a rat bastard, and I'm happy he's dead.
Okay, hold on. Okay,
Whoa.
that's your opinion. Let's hold on first of all. Dylan, do you believe that Ukraine should be able to defend itself?
Absolutely.
Why can't the Palestinians do that?
They can attack his IDF tanks anytime they want. They have the right
Why?
to.
Why?
It's
Why?
self-defense.
Why?
It's
And sure, there's
combatants. They're
okay, give them-
combatants. They're allowed
okay,
to fight
give-
combatants. That's
okay.
war.
Why don't you give them weapons to fight the Israeli occupation like you give in Ukraine?
Because Hamas will use the weapons to target civilians. The Ukrainian
No,
army
no,
has
no.
not shown that they do that
That's not an
systematically.
excuse. Why don't you
Why is that not an
support
excuse?
the
How is that not? I
Palestinian?
don't want to
Pretty
give
good
guns to
excuse.
someone who's saying, "I'm gonna go kill all the Jews." Like I don't want to do that.
Nobody's
That's not my
saying kill all the
prerogative.
Jews. Nobody's saying kill all the Jews.
They said, let
Nobody's
me read it again. The Jews will hide behind the rocks and trees, and the rocks and trees will cry out, "Oh Muslim, there is a Jew hiding behind me. Come and kill
Right.
him."
Okay, we don't have an Islamic state right now. Take it easy. I don't know where you
That's
learned
what
that
he
hadith
said.
from. All
I'm
right,
sorry.
take it
That's
easy.
what. That's
Hold
what.
on, hold on, hold on,
Why
hold
do you
Let's
why do you
not
Dylan,
cry?
stop,
pretend.
stop,
Why do you
stop.
cry
Hamas,
every
the
day?
reason why
Why do you
Israel
cry?
wanted
Why do you cry?
Hamas allowed Hamas's original the charity group it sprouted from to operate because they wanted to work as a
How about-
counterbalance against
how about
Fatah.
withdrawing
They
from the
knew that it was
country?
more radical and could help delegitimize the Palestinian cause. Why are we surprised that it's horrifically radical?
Oh, why have they been sealed for 16 years? Would I have been able to breathe in an open air prison?
What the? You're not responding to anything I'm saying. You just said they're
Well,
not a
you're not
terrorist
making no
organization,
fucking
but they
sense. You
engage in
talk about a
terrorism. That's
hadith.
all I'm
There's a
saying.
Jew behind a
I
rock.
want the
I don't give-
occupation to
Oh,
end.
there's no
So don't
Jews
pretend
behind a rock.
Hamas are like great,
Well,
fantastic
okay,
guys. They're gonna go
well,
into southern Israel and hunt the babies.
Well, according to the Christian scripture, when Jesus comes, he's going to kill all the Jews. Should we match the death by death? You want to use scriptures here?
What the fuck are you talking? What?
Dude,
Okay,
Is
okay,
it-
okay, okay.
That's what it
Is
says.
Jesus
That's what
a
it
terrorist?
says.
You're just
Oh,
rambling.
Well, I mean, the
Stardust,
Christian says-
Stardust,
let's
and
hold
Ali.
on, hold on,
Stardust.
hold on,
Okay,
one more-
okay.
one more
the
thing,
fuck
one
Do
more
we
thing.
have Christian terrorists
Christians are
running
saying put a-
into Israel and executing people the way that we have Hamas doing it?
Hamas was the creation of
shouldn't be-
Netanyahu, people. You
Not
Talk about
you
Lebanon,
you
people
created
talk about
Hamas.
Wait.
You
So
created-
one minute you're saying Hamas they have a right to defend themselves against the open air prison. The other hand, they're a creation of Israel. So are they a good thing or a bad thing?
Go read it out, man. I'm not lying to you. They
I'm
gave them
asking you
money.
then, are they
Which
either
one
they're a
is it?
creation of Israel, which would probably be bad, or they're defending themselves, which would
Every
be good?
human being has the right to self-determination. Did they kill innocent people? Yeah, they're wrong. But did they kill soldiers? Yes. Was it a matter of trying to get attention for their cause? Yes, because nobody's talking to them. You're making
That's
peace
called
with all.
terrorism.
Hold on.
Do you think it was a good strategy?
Well, if you withdraw all your people from their land and you build a wall, whatever you want, and if they come into Israeli territories after that, I'd be the first one to they're piece of shit,
Okay.
they're terrorists.
Stardust,
Okay?
Ali, counterpoints. Go ahead.
Okay. one, I don't understand the citing of Christian scripture, because we don't have a Christian version of Hamas running into Israel, committing atrocious war crimes. Secondly, if you are a pro-Palestine supporter, I feel like you shouldn't be justifying Hamas no matter what. Yes, Palestine has a right to self-determination. That doesn't mean they have the right to back up a terrorist organization to go and rape people and slaughter families. It makes the rest makes Palestine look like terrorists. If you like, do you want Palestinians to be like associated with terrorism? Are all Palestinians terrorists? No, they're not. We know that they're not.
I agree with you 100%. Nobody's saying that. What we're saying that it was a pressure cooker, Gaza. It was bound to explode.
Excuse it.
Oh,
Going after civilians is
it was bound
inexcusable,
to
and
explode.
raping women, killing
By the
families,
way,
killing young children and families. There's no excuse. That is actually un-Islamic. Like, it's ridiculous. You know, they are making things worse for Palestinians.
You're not supposed to kill innocent people. According to Islam, you cannot kill a woman, a child, not even cut a tree. And according to Christian scripture, like you say, what do you think the Christian Zionists are trying to put all the Jews in Israel at one time? Because they want to bring about the rapture, so they could say, okay, you're going to come Christian, we're going to kill you. If you want to use scriptures here,
okay.
I don't think we should go there. Everybody knows what's going on.
We do got to let people in. We do got to let people in. Ali's been waiting.
Okay, let him in. I'm going to drink a water and relax.
Ali's been waiting.
But I just want you to know how much is worth of Palestinian life.
I'm sure you'll get your chance to respond, Omar. I promise. Ali.
So yeah, just like once again, we keep talking Palestinians, Hamas, terrorism, blah blah blah. Dylan brought up the Hamas Charter, whatever. We do realize that Israel wants to ethnically cleanse the Palestinians from their land as well. So once again, Stardust, Dylan, the whole thing. I understand Hamas is considered as terrorists, but that's the problem is that's all we paint them as, and that's the only people that get painted as that. When we say that Palestinians are retaliating, what are they retaliating to? The terrorism that is imposed on them. So if you guys want to keep using words like terrorism and you guys want to keep virtue signaling the deaths of the civilians in the whole spiel, I'm with it. But you have to give both sides. You have to give both sides the same argument. You have to say the same thing for both sides, because understand that it's not a one. What?
You just
virtue signaling. Okay, let me explain why I was saying that. Omar was saying that they aren't engaged in terrorism, and that there wasn't evidence that Israelis were being massacred. That's what he said. And so that's what I was challenging. And the idea that it's ridiculous when Hamas's charter says, go kill the Jews, that's what I was challenging. I believe Israel needs to end the occupation of Palestinian land in the West Bank, and that's the only way you will end the pressure cooker that is the Gaza Strip and undermine Hamas's support. That's what I believe. I believe that Netanyahu is engaged in a revenge campaign, and you can see the leader of the Blue and White Party saying on TV, who's now started this unity government, when asked, what about the civilian casualties? Over half the population is under the age of 14. How dare you ask me about civilian casualty? That's insane. If the leader of Hamas said that, that'd be like posted on every major news channel in the West. I agree with you, but if he denies terrorism, you have to challenge him on that, or it's going to look like people just don't want to see what's right in front of them.
I agree with you 100%.
No, we gotta let Ali respond. Stop. Omar, we gotta let Ali respond. Ali was addressed. Ali respond.
The rhetoric around the world is very simple. If you stand with Palestine, you're siding with Hamas, which is siding with terrorism, which isn't true. That's just not the case. Same thing on the other side. People are standing with Israel, right? And right now there's the glassing of Gaza that's being proposed. They're not standing with terrorism. These are people that have their own self-interest, and then that's the people they're siding with. So yes, Palestinians are going to see Hamas attack as a resistance to the occupation that's happening. You have to see it in that way. We don't get we're privileged enough as Americans to sit here and look at the terrorism and the civilians. It's like it's happening on both sides.
But that's the problem is so in one half we'll say that Hamas doesn't represent Palestinians, but then you were saying that Hamas, that this is Palestinians rising up. Like, which one is it? It seems to be the case
I'm saying it's both. Hamas does represent the Palestinians. Unfortunately, right now in the way that it happens, attacks on civilians are just the way the way of the land. Like it's not even not that it should be, but that's what's happening on both sides. So when we sit here and we want to condemn one side while not condemning the other equally, it
We
makes no
could.
sense.
I
Okay,
think it's
okay. I
been
don't
quite a
think
while since an
anybody.
attack like
Yeah.
that happened in those lands.
Okay. So
Like
yeah,
that
yeah.
nature of
Specifically,
attack
I mean,
Hey,
why
is
hold
not
on,
very
come
common,
on.
even in those
Because of
lands.
the
all of
Right?
occupation
the
to build
attack
the
One
on
at
land.
one at a
When I
time.
say
One at a
Israel
time.
Palestine,
Stardust,
Yeah.
then Loner,
Yes.
then Counter. Go.
Come
Okay.
on. I didn't get to go from the
Nobody.
last
Counter's
round.
been waiting,
Okay.
Oh,
man.
Counter's
Wait.
been going.
Okay.
Okay, sorry. Sorry,
Star,
Stardust.
yeah,
Counter's
Star.
been waiting.
I need to address some things before they slip away. Okay. Listen, I think
Fine.
we need to deal with each other honestly, and I think part of the problem is a lack of honesty here. So I'm if it seems like I'm being prescriptive where I'm saying like, oh, the Jews can just ethnically cleanse Gaza and who gives a shit? Like, no, I'm not trying to say that that's good. I'm saying that that's what's happening. So basically, what's happening is Israel left Gaza in a purposeful state of neglect and festered, according to Empowered Man. You know, we've heard it a couple of times. Bibi Net, and I think this has been confirmed. Bibi Netanyahu let funding get back to Hamas so they would be politically empowered against more moderate political factions. So they let it fester on purpose so that bad things would happen, so that they would have the pretext to ethnically cleanse. Now, they probably didn't expect it to be as bad as it happened. They probably didn't expect an entire kibbutz to be basically wiped out. But at the same time, they probably knew that a few Israelis were going to die, and then that would give them pretext to do what they want to do. But I do.
Wait,
But I
wait,
also
Connor, can you
feel.
repeat that? I just want to know that I understand your point clearly. Could you repeat that?
Yeah. I think that they knew that when they were letting money get back to Hamas, they were outcompeting the more moderate factions in the Gaza Strip, and they knew
Okay.
that eventually Israelis would be killed, but they
Wait.
probably did not expect it to be on the scale that happened in the past 72 hours. Guys,
Have
this is like the
you-
prelude to my points. This isn't even my point.
I
Okay?
don't even actually.
So-
I don't necessarily even agree with that because when
That's fine.
it is true that they allowed extremism to fester in the Gaza Strip, and in some ways they promoted it and allowed that to happen because they wanted it to be a counterbalance to the moderates. But when these organizations, like the charity that Hamas descend from, started to store guns, they started raiding the storehouses. So once they started to see that started to become like a physical threat, it does seem they changed. They did change their stance on the organization.
Okay.
that,
Then
um,
that's
I don't
fine.
think
Let's
any. If I
hold
can,
on.
I
We're
don't-
not. I'm not even close to my next points. Okay, so let me just lay them out real quick. I'll try to be brief. Okay. The reason why I feel like Empowered Man, you're being a little bit disingenuous, is because I know where, oh Muslim, the Jew is behind the rock behind me, and they're gonna cry out. You mentioned the fact that there's revelations, that there's like end time scripture in the Bible that talks about like, the Messiah and the coming back and the end of days and the Armageddon and all that kind of stuff. You and I both know that that's in the fucking Quran. So we know that Hamas is using the Quran in order to justify ethnically cleansing Jews. So we know that they're terrorists and that they're extremists. And we shouldn't be playing this game of like, oh, maybe they're not, maybe they are, maybe they're not, maybe it's justified, maybe it's not. Because basically at that point, I feel like you're being dishonest. Now, sorry, let me move to my last point and then we'll call it a day. So basically, Ali, I believe, is the person that we were talking to. So I'm just going to explain it from a Western perspective. When I know what you're saying with like, there's dead civilians, men and women on the side of the Israelis. They got blood on their hands. They're not clean. So as a result, why would you expect this? This is just the way things are. But what I would say is from a Western moral perspective, like Israel has the military capacity to just kill everyone in the Gaza Strip. They could do it in the next 24 hours. They could just carpet bomb the entire area, murder everyone, and then as a result, ethnically cleanse it. They could just do that. But what they're doing instead, allegedly, obviously, I think that there's a little bit of bad faith here, is they're targeting military they're targeting military targets, and then there happens to be collateral damage, and then they do that. Now, final concession before I let it go. I think that the Israelis are dealing in bad faith. And what I mean by that is they're targeting these civilian things. They're doing super heavy airstrikes. They know the collateral damage is going to happen. They know the Palestinians are going to be pissed off. And they know when the ground forces go in, there's going to be a more bloody resistance to Israelis. And as a result, the Israelis are going to be double down and clamp down harder. I'll leave it there for now.
Stardust.
Yeah, so I want to address some of Ollie's points. I don't think anyone on this panel is going to deny that there were crimes committed by Israel, that there were unjustified deaths, that there were unjustified killings because of Israel. I don't think anyone is denying that turning Palestine into a not Palestine, turning Gaza into a parking lot would be terrible. Um, but it's not like we are saying that Israel is completely blameless in this. What we are saying is what we are doing is responding to what Omar was saying, which was denying in some sense that Hamas was a terrorist organization. Hamas is a terrorist organization organizing terrorist attacks, and the attack from Hamas recently on Israel resulted in more deaths in that one attack than all of the other attacks Hamas has launched on Israel combined. And also, it's one of the biggest killings of Jewish people since the Holocaust. I mean, it's nothing near it, but it's still huge. It's still a huge amount of people. We can't deny that. We can't, just condemn Netanyahu for his actions on Israel on the Palestinian people. We have to acknowledge the reality that Hamas is doing these actions and they are making it harder for Palestinian people, and they are operating out of areas that create civilian casualties and utilize civilians as human shields.
Can I ask, if I may, before we respond and things like that? Because I keep seeing this brought up like they're both bad. True, but we can draw a distinction, right? A difference. There is a difference between callous, not caring, neglect leading to child's death, carpet bombing leading to children's death, and a difference between that, which is morally wrong, and the only targeting military targets so you can get to the ooey gooey center of the civilians that you want to kill, right? Which is what Hamas did. They did target military targets during their strike too, but it was only to pave the way so that they could get to those settlements, right? And execute men, women, and children en masse, right? That was the stated goal and the stated purpose. So we can draw a distinction, right? It bothers me that we say they're both bad. True, but one is much worse.
I mean, you can claim to draw a distinction, but it's optics, right? So one group of people went in with guns and did that, and then the other group of people is just doing it with bombs. And like you can claim that the IDF is like trying to attack specifically Hamas, but it's the fact of the matter is that that's not how it happens. The people that are in these buildings are not all Hamas members. There are children that are in the areas as well, and when they're carpet bombing or when they're doing the little warning bomb, they give you 30 minutes to get your entire shit out of your house, leave. You're displacing those people. They don't have a place to live. There's no water, electricity, or food being transferred. It's like, so I mean, yeah, the optics of it is different. One has military, like a military budget that's huge, and the other doesn't. So I mean, yeah, the optics are different, sure, but I'm not going to say that one is any worse than the other.
It's not.
There's
the thing
a
is,
moral
it's
difference.
not
Ali,
optics. It's
Loner
not
than
about.
Omar.
It's
Ali, the
not
optics.
about. I thought it was.
The optics
Loner,
are
then Omar. Loner box,
Our names
and then
sound the
Omar.
same.
Yeah.
It's not optics, it's about intent. No one would ever say that 30,000 Jews getting killed by a death squad in Eastern Europe is the same as 30,000 German civilians getting killed in a Allied airstrike, because one of them actually had a military objective and the other one was just about killing innocent people. They are very different in intent. I don't know if there's evidence of the IDF actually saying, like, is there Hamas people in this building? Don't care, blow them up anyway. If that came out, that would be very comparable. But I think from what we've seen now is, imagine if Hamas had the IDF's power. All the Jews would die, right? That's the difference.
Oh, they would be
So the only difference,
not 75-year occupation.
Let Loner finish. Let Loner finish. Let Loner finish.
Finish
Stop.
a fucking statement. Holy shit. Okay. Also, I don't really like this tendency of people to conflate defending yourself or armed resistance with what Hamas did. Armed resistance and it's an occupation. Armed resistance is justified. Intifadas are justified. Barghouti, what he advocates for, is justified. Not targeting civilians. What Hamas did is none of that. And you don't even need to It's so clear that you can say that Hamas are representative and they have had popularity. They're not as popular as people think. There hasn't been an election since 2006. Vast majority of people living in Gaza. Vast majority of people living in Gaza never vote. Vast majority of people living in Gaza never voted for Hamas. I'm just going to keep talking. They never voted for Hamas. It actually seems to be the case that more of them want the PA back in. Hamas suppresses opposition. They don't care about Palestinians living within Gaza half the time. They have this veneer of anti-corruption, but then when people go on strike, they get arrested, fucking tortured, the shit beaten out of them. They arrest political dissidents. So I think that that's a really important distinction to make. Like Hamas are a death cult. They're nothing to do with like, and even I buy the pressure cooker argument, but in liberation struggles of the past, this is never how like you had like people who did necklacing in South Africa, but the ANC condemned it, right? They chose sabotage, they chose military targets, and that's a really important distinction to make because one of those actually can lead to liberation, the other one can't.
So it seems that the distinction that you're making is that Hamas openly admits to what they're doing versus like the IDF and the Israeli government, which just kind of doesn't say what they're doing. We do understand
Ali,
that
you need to address something I said. You need to address something that was said. You need to address something that I said and something that Loner Box said, which was that if Israel wanted to, they could kill all the civilians in Gaza tonight.
I'm about to address that. The only reason they don't do that is because their war crime atrocities are already, like, most of the world already doesn't agree with how Israel's operating, right? And then America's the only person that supports them. If Israel were to bomb Gaza overnight, the world would there would be a world war and everyone would be against Israel. That's why they don't do it. That's why they do it slowly. So the distinction is
so you think Israel wait.
People wants it immediately, and the other group of people is doing it slowly with the support of one of the strongest nations in the world.
Let me address the optics.
I don't know about that. So what I would say is that if you look at any other country that has to deal with like a group of people that are like militantly against them and committing terrorist acts, I think Israel has been actually has had a better record than most other countries when it comes to civilian casualties. If you look at any other country that is not even involved in their own backyard, right? Like going into other countries and dealing with like terrorist organizations, there are way more civilian deaths. So, I mean, I'm not saying it's justified. I'm not saying it's
does that
good,
apply to the two that we're talking about?
Can I get? You see, the Palestinians in Gaza or in the occupied territories are looking at the government in Ramallah that recognized Israel, that made peace with Israel, that went to the Oslo agreements, and they are nothing but collaborators. They have no strength. They have no power. They don't even talk to them. The last time the Israeli government had to sit down with those people is 2014. They have no respect for them. So what are you going to do? You're going to opt out. Okay, Hamas is only one resistant. Okay, we're with them. You have to have some form of resistance.
Why should Israel meet with Hamas when Hamas hasn't allowed
elections? Forget about Hamas.
He's saying they're not meeting with the moderates either.
They're not even meeting. The last time they met with
remind me who rejected the old mayor offer in 2008.
Hold on.
Wick, you're not going to do that one. The napkin accords.
They're not talking to the group of Palestinians in Ramallah who's supposed to be the president, who recognize Israel as a state to exist, who have no army, have nothing, but they turned them into watchdogs for the Israeli government. You know, like sheriffs. They don't even talk to them. The last time they talked to that government, the modern government, the government that made peace, was in 2014. So when the Palestinians look at that, so who's going to fight for me? I'm going to make a deal with the devil if I have to get my freedom and to feed them. Anybody will do that. Human beings.
Wait, huh? Can I ask Stardust a question? Stardust, you said that Israel, in comparison to other countries, deals with terrorists with less civilian casualties, and
I think in comparison to countries like for example, like America goes into other countries. I'm pretty sure. I could be wrong on this, but I'm pretty sure like America going into Afghanistan, right? Like comparison in that sense. So yeah.
Okay, how?
Well, okay, so what I would say is that, if you had like a terrorist organization like right at your border, essentially, that was like, trying to fuck with you, I think most countries would probably have a lot more bloodshed. I'm not saying that there isn't any. Obviously, there's tons, but I think that
Dylan, if I can back her up real quick, or at least Steel Manor, like if you look at Mexico, the narco cartel stuff, there's shitloads of civilian deaths, like tens of thousands. Obviously, this is like inter-gang warfare. It's not always the government executing people, but there's still shitloads of deaths. When you look at Afghanistan, same thing, shitloads of deaths. And if you look at Iraq, same thing, shitloads of deaths. So I guess my
thing isn't that Israel or that nation states aren't brutal in dealing with terrorist organizations, but this idea that Israel is like the highest standard of dealing with like they respect civilians more, because that's what it sounded like. You were saying you said it was better than most. You said why better than the United States then, for example? Like what standards of like combat engagement have been
I
set that
don't,
makes it better than the
to be
United
honest with
States.
you, I don't know a whole lot about combat engagement. I'm just looking
So
at like
where does this
numbers
claim come from then?
specifically. Just looking at
Counterterrorism
numbers
stats from the past
specifically.
20
Yeah,
years.
yeah. Like
Counterterror.
numbers.
What numbers?
I would say raw. Okay, if I'm steel manning her perspective, because I think you could
Yeah.
like, okay, I get where you're Okay, so hold on. I get where both of y'all are
I'm just
going.
curious where it came from, because it just, it's
Mhm.
right now I think Israel's dropped over 6,000 to 8,000 bombs in the Gaza Strip. We have UN doctors getting killed, Malaysian doctors getting killed.
Mhm.
In the past 72
I mean,
hours or before that?
No, I believe it's the last 72 to
Yeah.
like 92 hours. It's been over like
Yeah, I wouldn't.
6,000 bombs that have been
I
dropped.
would.
The
And
last
so
72
I would
hours
compare.
and the Israeli
Mhm.
government is openly saying, when asked to care about civilian casualties, like, how dare you even ask us that question? That's
Yeah,
their
I
open
wouldn't.
stance from the
Sure.
unity government. So how is that the standard for dealing with terrorist
Sure.
organizations?
No. I think
I-
within the last 72 hours, it significantly has changed. But if you look at like in comparison over the last 70 years, prior to this most recent Hamas attack, I think you would see the numbers generally are less with Israel.
Globally.
Well, what? Let me ask Dylan
Or
then.
per
What do
capita.
you think that they would have told that America, President Bush after 9/11 would have said when they asked what? Well, what about the civilian casualties? What do you think our response would have been under those?
You
I
stand with us or you
remember
stand with
George
terrorism.
Bush
That was literally
walking into and this in my opinion shows that George Bush was, in my opinion, a monster. The invasion of Iraq was built on lies. He was terrible at managing the economy, but that's a separate question. But the Iraq War was built on lies. He did not get solid intelligence to do it. What he told Colin Powell to say at the UN was disgusting. But putting all of that aside, the immediate aftermath of 9/11, I remember him going to a mosque and saying in front of like everybody, like, remember everyone, Muslim Americans are our friends. He would go on to monitor Muslim Americans and go on to
Muslim
engage in behavior that was so
yes,
terrible.
but what about the Muslims
But
in
we
Iraq
don't even see an
or
attempt
Afghanistan?
to
was
show that
good.
image from the Israeli government. Not even an attempt.
He specifically said some pretty. I'm pretty sure he said some pretty bad things about Muslims and other countries.
Of course,
though,
he said
right?
bad
Didn't
things
he?
about
I
Muslims. But
think
my point is, the Israeli
George,
government is openly like, we do not care if we kill
George,
civilians. That is the
Yes,
the
that is
open stance of the Israeli
within the
government right
last
now.
within the last 72 hours. I would 100% agree with you, but I still think, like, given the history, even setting rhetoric aside, if you look at the history of the last 70 years in comparison to other countries involved in conflicts for less time, I think you will find, like, generally
there's
that
about
the
there's
numbers
about
will.
but like, so what though?
there's about 70 massacres in 1948. There's a whole village called Dar Yassin. They wiped out the whole village, men, women, and children, to ethnically cleanse them. You have to Google people. It's very easy these days. You don't need somebody like me or a professor teaching in college. Just Google 1948 Israeli massacres against Palestinians. They killed women and children because they wanted to
Yeah,
scare them,
I'm not
so they could
denying
leave the
that there
land.
are.
Not to
I'm not
be
denying
that,
that there are massacres.
not to
Yeah.
be that guy, but like even Dar Yassin, as horrible as that was, they took the kids and dropped them at the gates of Jerusalem, where they went to live in an orphanage. They didn't kill the kids. I mean, still a
So they
horrible
killed
thing
the
to do, but
parents. So they killed the parents. See, this is the
I'm
problem.
just
Humans,
comparing it to the Hamas attack.
no,
It was
the
Hamas killed the
problem
That
kids.
happened
is the problem
7
is
hours
that
ago.
Palestinian don't matter. Their lives don't matter, people. They just like, I just ate a Kit Kat candy. That's the same thing. Hold on,
Okay,
let's
if
talk
you
about.
have
we
to
really
choose, if you have
think-
to choose between killing the kids or not killing the kids, what do you
Oh,
think is
kill
less
anybody.
immoral?
Isn't that terrorism?
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I
no.
didn't say it wasn't terrorism. I'm just saying, like, what happened in the last
terrorism?
what happened in the last 72 hours. I think the only comparable thing that Israel was involved in to what happened in the last 72 hours was probably Beirut, right? Sabra Shatila. But that
yeah.
was, but again,
Uh,
Sharon lost his job for that. I mean, he didn't get the war crime thing,
He's
but
a
like,
criminal.
but even then, the IDF didn't. They surrounded the camps. They were the ones who did the killing. That was the Christians who did that. But yeah,
But
like that's probably a more comparable one. Yeah.
Okay, let me hold on. Let's talk about the optics. Our brother there, Counterpoint, said because they were shooting people in the face. It's like here, I live in Brooklyn, New York. If a black guy mugs a woman at the subway and he makes it 6 o'clock in the news, we all go crazy. Oh, those blacks, they're going crazy in the neighborhood. Go get him. But if a white guy steals $60 million from Wall Street, nobody talks about it. So in other words, if you get killed by a plane, it's okay because you didn't see their faces. But if you shot him in the face, it's different. This is the same scenario. All humans,
sure.
all humans
I'll
should have
address
the
this.
same value. All humans should have the same value.
Okay, I want to address this directly. So the reason why it's particularly barbaric from I keep saying like an American or Western perspective. I see Ali like, cringe every time I say it because I'm sure he's lived here for a while, all that kind of stuff.
Born
The
here,
reason why it's
baby.
Yeah, exactly. So the reason why it's particularly barbaric. So let's say let's use Afghanistan, the drone strikes as an example, right? You have half a dozen jihadist telecommunications that you track over 6 months. These people are planning suicide vest attacks, et cetera, et cetera. They all congregate in a single location. You hit it with a Hellfire missile. You kill six jihadist terrorists that were planning suicide bombing attacks. Oops, turns out that it was a wedding from one of their nephews or nieces. You actually killed 30 civilians, okay?
Yeah.
That's like a scenario that has happened. We know it's happened, okay? The moral difference between the two is that the intention was to kill the planners of mass murder and mayhem who wanted to cause chaos, and largely, by the way, was going to kill Muslims. They weren't largely going to kill Westerners or Americans. They were going to kill more Muslims and Arabs and Tajiks and Pashtuns and all them, right?
I agree
So,
with you.
okay, so that is an attempt that is still evil. It's still bad. It's still killing innocent life. Life matters, right? But at the same time, if American special forces go to that same wedding, they see the 6 bad guys, they shoot them in the face with rifles, and then they look at the wedding party and they're like, well, these are probably all terrorist sympathizers anyways. And they start machine gunning the wedding party to death, even though it's men, women, kids, and all that kind of shit. That would be seen as more evil because there's a level of intentionality where you're taking innocent life that you know is innocent.
Australian troops did that.
I feel like you're removing the intentionality from the bombers, but,
Okay,
but that's fine.
Wait, no, hold on. Ali, are you saying that
solution?
the IDF, is this your claim, that the IDF and Israel as a whole, as a system, that their goal is just to kill Palestinians? That's their goal.
Yeah, to kill Palestinians, remove them from the land, ethnically cleanse them, 1000%.
Okay, so Ali, there's one thing that I think like you and I disagree on, okay? Because I'm trying to be descriptive and I'm trying to be as charitable as possible. I don't think that the Israelis give a shit whether or not the Palestinians live or die. They just want them off the land. So, like, if they could have all of the Palestinians move to Jordan or move to Egypt or move to Turkey or move to whatever, they would do that instead of killing.
And then they continue to make their borders bigger. They tried to capture all their land. Hold on. What would happen?
Well, hold on. So hold on. Do you? So this is my question because, like, I think that if every Israeli, if every Jew was a strict Orthodox believer in Judaism and they believed in the project of Greater Israel, that Israel was going to like rule from the Nile to the Euphrates or whatever, I would think you were correct. But seriously, like I know a shitload of Jews and I would say like, I don't know, 70%, 80% of them are like secular atheists. They're not literalists. They don't actually believe in Greater Israel.
I'm not talking about the Jews. I'm talking about the government, right? The government of Israel would want to expand its land and would continue to take other territories. I'm not talking about Jews have nothing here. The Jews are just the people.
So are you talking about Israeli Zionists or
the government of Israel would want to expand it? Okay, so let's just say all the Palestinians leave. Israel isn't just going to keep its borders. It's going to want to expand its borders and take over more land. That's just what's going to happen.
Okay, so hold on. I just want to understand this real quick before we move on. So, is your claim that because I've heard this claimed earlier today that the Netanyahu is sympathetic to extreme right-wing giga Orthodox Jews who probably do want Greater Israel or whatever. Is your perspective that if they had their way, they would just continue expansion to the Greater Israel project? They would just have kids endlessly until they could fulfill that vision?
While taking over territories and claiming them as theirs, yes.
Okay.
Listen,
I don't.
Do you think it would just stop? Do you think it would just stop if the Palestinians left and Israel had that land? Do you think it would just stop there?
Do you think they would just go on forever?
So for instance, yeah. So I think there's logistical things here. For instance, like if I don't know the percentages of the amount of the extreme right wing or the ultra orthodox right wing that would want to continue the Greater Israel project, and then also they're surrounded by other secular Israelis and all that kind of stuff. So I don't think they have the population. I don't think they have the political momentum. I don't think they have the political support. So while
you got
they have the momentum to expand the way they have, right?
We're not saying all Jewish thing like that.
I mean, it's a pretty small territory.
Jews have
pretty big land, and they started off pretty small and expanded pretty largely.
Jewish are pretty liberal.
I would say that's because of the Jewish diaspora.
I live in New
Well,
York.
yeah, but that's what I'm saying is they would want to continue to expand. Why wouldn't they?
No, no,
If
this
a
is the
country,
fanatics.
if a country can go in, claim a land, and then make their land bigger and have a higher population, and why wouldn't they?
I mean, okay, there's also a question of whether they legitimately can do that. I mean, there's right now a question, and I think, honestly, I think the room has somewhat kind of accepted the idea that Israel's going to move in and crush Hamas for like the next 20, 30 years, and there's no way that they could not fail in that. The Mossad had a massive intelligence failure when it comes to the start of this war in the first place. Hamas is not going to be the only force fighting. It's also going to be Palestinian Islamic Jihad. Hamas has what? Let's just say 30,000. If we're not talking about more like serious estimates and not their own numbers, 30,000 fighters and tunnels that they've dug in over 30 years. Add Palestinian Islamic Jihad to that. Add Hezbollah, which has tons and tons and tons of financiers and funding from Iran all across the Middle East. You've got certain Syrian parties that are talking about intervening, and who knows what other terrorist groups or Palestinian liberation organizations are going to get involved. I don't know if the Israeli military, which has its own problems right now and struggle with the government, there's been like a 10% reduction. And I think like funding for the actual ground forces of Israel, they've been talking mostly investing into like high tech border security. I don't know if they can last a 15, 20, 25, 30-year occupation. That's what they thought they could do in southern Lebanon, and they failed to do that. And I think even if they could, would Israelis on year 10, 11, 12, 13, after having all these IDF guys get killed in caves that are 20 to 30 feet under the ground that they're gonna have to crawl in, have no idea what those caves are like, gonna be bunkers all across the Gaza Strip, and then they're gonna have to be shot from windows and bombing attacks and car bombings.
Yeah.
It would make sense for Israelis to question that and say maybe it isn't worth it. And I think that should be the argument that many people make.
I think Ali's. If I can steel man Ali real quick. Yeah, just real quick. So I didn't take Ali's point as like an actual like logistical Lebensraum Nazi Germany like achievable goal, more like a moral statement of the way that they view their expansion into territory, where it's similar to say that they're looking for Lebensraum. So if the people leave, they leave, and if they don't leave, then fuck them. And we're going to put them in a position where they bite the hand that feeds, and then we're going to fuck them over. Which, by the way, like, I don't want to be like too pessimistic about it, but when I see the map of Israel slowly consuming Palestine, when I see Israelis talking about stopping settlements at XYZ ABC, but then I see the settlements continue to expand and then get annexed into the IDF, for me, it's not what you say, it's what you're doing.
Counterpoint 2 months ago.
Which that was my point with like you guys just saying like they're Hamas is declaring that they're doing it. The IDF is just kind of secretly doing it, so it's like who has a face to it?
A month ago, Netanyahu, when he was in the UN Assembly, when they did the yearly thing, he showed a map. He showed a map of Israel that encompassed the West Bank, the Gaza, and the Golan Heights as one state. The whole idea, even Egypt has warned the Palestinians not to leave. They're going to block them because they say if you leave, you're not going to come back. Jordan said the same thing. You got to stay on your land and die on your land. Anyway, who benefits from this crisis? You know, Netanyahu has been under a lot of pressure. Israel was a lot of protesting, a lot of demonstration. This is like a gift that came to Netanyahu to save his government and to unite.
Wait, do you think Netanyahu's government
absolutely not a gift?
this?
No, but I'm thinking. What I'm saying is that the Israeli population has been. You see, the Israeli population, especially the secularists of that portion, they were against him trying to change the laws for this. He's trying to make the Supreme Court into a kangaroo court, and there was every day demonstration. The Israeli public was split in half. As a matter of fact, some people say civil war, whatever. Who benefited from this? The first one is Netanyahu. He benefited a lot.
That is
you're just wrong. No, Netanyahu,
not
like
anyway. There's already been
like
polling done.
80%,
I think by the Jerusalem Times showing that the majority of Israelis want Netanyahu to resign right now, and 92% of them believe that his government is at fault for the attacks in southern Israel because of security failures.
So
it took 8 hours. Argument to the people for the last 12 years has been, I can manage the conflict. I'll keep you safe. I'm not the best with economics. I'm not the best with maybe the courts. I may be a little corrupt, but I'll keep you safe for the Palestinians. And he failed.
That
How does
We
it help?
also have
it took 8 hours to get help. Why? Israel is only like 3 hours from one side to another.
They
This is
moved
the
a lot of
problem.
troops into the West Bank because they
No,
were
no,
expecting
So
settler
no,
violence.
no.
hold on.
They
Again,
just
I
to
think you
help.
can steel man what he's. Yeah, I think you can steel man what Empowered Man is saying. And by the way, I wouldn't take either one of your perspectives until 6 months or a year from now. Because here's the thing: is like wartime presidents, wartime generals, they tend to be popular if they're able to coalesce people, organize them, and prosecute a war effectively. And then also, even if the war isn't prosecuted effectively, if they're losing casualties and all that kind of stuff, they can still use that as a propagandistic tool for their reelection, where they can say, I'm prosecuting the war, we're fighting the good fight, we're in the trenches right now, I've been doing it the whole time, I've been here since day one, etc., etc. I could practically write Bibi Netanyahu's like reelection speech for him right now. And it's the same thing with Bush. I don't even think Bush was that popular prior to 9/11. And then during the 9/11 attacks, people were still like, oh shit, like what the fuck is going on? But within the next 6 months, they just handed him shitloads of power and let him do what he wanted to do. And even though he was
Do we
wildly
have
unpopular.
Do we have
No.
anything that is comparable to the tearing of the asshole of Netanyahu that is going on right now in Israeli media and that happened in American media after
Yeah.
9/11? And did we also have
2004.
the same type of polling that's coming out that showed that the majority of Americans wanted George Bush to resign after the 9/11 attacks?
Okay. No, I don't think it's a 1-to-1, but I think that if you went into the 2004 election, you would have thought that George Bush was going to lose, because every single mainstream media site said, he bungled the war, he abused his power, he was an asshole. Most people don't like
They
him.
said he
We're
knew about
losing
the attack
tens of
before it
thousands of
happened.
people. He knew about the attack before it happened, all that kind of stuff. You would have assumed that Bush was on his way out, and then I saw it's like Bush wins, and I'm like, what the fuck are we talking about? I thought that this guy was like universally
But
hated. I thought he was the new Hitler. So
Well,
so
John
all I'm
Kerry
saying
was
is
a
like,
really bad
you guys
candidate,
could be right. Maybe Jewish politics is different. Maybe they fold easier. But I'm just saying
I
that
think
like
the
wartime
situations are different.
politicians can. Maybe they
but the
are.
problem
When
is
9/11
with
happened, George Bush
okay.
was in office for 1 year. When this happened, Netanyahu has been in office for 12 years, building and changing the security apparatus of Israel. It is his security apparatus, which him and his party designed, which failed Israelis. George Bush was only in office for a year. He couldn't have designed the security apparatus that failed by the time 9/11 happened.
Yeah,
How
that's
much
why
If you
he was
remember,
in
just real quick,
Netanyahu
just real quick,
term?
if you remember, Clinton, I'm sorry, not Clinton, Bush blamed Clinton. They were able to blame the previous administration for a lot of the failures here, right? A lot of they basically said that previous administration was weak. It weakened us at home and abroad, and that's what led this. Now, that wasn't true, but they were able to leverage that in the elections, leverage that in order to push on to
they
victory.
took Kerry.
no
Stop.
parallel that
Stop.
they can do?
Kerry,
Stop.
the
Stop. 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 Stop.
Republicans.
Stop. In Netanyahu's case, he's been in office for far longer, and as Dylan wisely
Yeah.
pointed out, he's been building this. Again, Netanyahu, if he survives politically, I don't know what to tell you. I would be shocked, but
Depends on
stranger
the
things have
outcome.
happened.
Depends on the
I
outcome.
know
what's gonna
Loner's
happen.
been wanting to get in here, so I want to toss it to Loner, then we'll go to Counterbox. Go ahead.
Like, it's not like it's an unusual thing even in Israeli history. Golda Meir resigned after the Yom Kippur War, which is 50 years ago, like almost to the day. I think the George Bush comparison isn't perfect because it's quite far off, actually, because so many of the failures are directly traceable to Netanyahu. The people in the IDF who weren't turning up to their posts all the way throughout the protests, and Hezbollah literally saying a few months ago, the IDF is weak, the time is now, they're weaker than
They
ever.
are weak. They are weak.
Yeah, they were saying that, and then there's also the fact that they were stretched too thin across the West Bank because of the settler violence. That's also Netanyahu because he's the settler guy. There's also the fact that he even said, if Bush had said 3 years before 9/11 that it's actually based to support fucking Al Qaeda to weaken the moderate opposition, he's done. Yeah,
Yeah,
But
listen.
when is he up for re-election?
I
There's no
actually don't
election there.
know.
It's like snap election. It's parliamentary. It's not like our
Yeah,
system
they've had
here
like
in the United States.
5 elections in 4
Yeah,
years. Or something.
it depends on the parliament if it doesn't have a majority. Listen,
Mhm.
the Israeli army is not an invisible army. In 1973, during the Yom Kippur War, they collapsed within 72 hours. The United States did a bridge from Berlin all the way to Israel of weapons to the battlefield. Kissinger called Sadat and told him, "Listen, if you go to Jerusalem, we're gonna wreck Cairo." In 2006, fucking Hezbollah they were cowards. They ran away from the battle. Even the Israeli report said that our soldiers were cowards. They left and they ran away with their tails behind their back. They couldn't fight man to man. So Israel, what does Israel do? This is the Israeli strategy. We're gonna hit your infrastructure. We're gonna destroy everything. We're gonna make it so expensive for you to. So next time you don't want to fight. What did they do? They destroyed the capital of Lebanon instead of fighting Hezbollah at the border. Cowardly act. So don't take this IDF. This is the invisible army. All of a sudden, if this army was so invisible, why are we sending all these ships closer to Israel? Why are we already sending weapons? They even haven't fought.
Listen, hold up.
Hold on. It's been 24 hours, and everybody said we need a package for Israel. A package for what? They even haven't shot one bullet yet. Why they need a package already? We gotta send out money. That $4 billion is not enough. We gave them every year. This is all bullshit.
No, hold on.
The outcome, Netanyahu's political life is the outcome what happens in Gaza. If he succeeded, he's okay. If not, I don't think they're going to succeed. They're going to go into a war zone, into buildings, snipers. The Israeli soldier is going to be in harm's way because he's not opening in an open battlefield. You're not fighting an army. You're fighting. You understand?
I do. Not only do I understand, but I also think that this cuts both ways. And here's the thing. No offense to my Arab Mujahideen brothers, okay, but y'all can't fight for shit, okay? And what I mean by that is literally like you just watch Mujahideen footage and they're basically walking into the street, standing in the middle of the street, blasting an AK down the street, and then they don't hit shit, and then you wonder why the fucking neighborhood looks like ass. Whereas modern trained military, what they do is they actually aim and shoot. They get into stacks, they throw grenades, they throw flashbangs into rooms before they go into them, then they kill everybody inside the room. So to act like a modern military is not going to fucking absolutely annihilate like jihadi militias. It's a daydream.
Hold on. Stop.
You defeat.
We defeated the Soviet Union for you. We did it for you. We're the one who freed you from the Cold War.
Yeah, with like a 1 to 10 KD ratio.
No, we're the one who bled to death. Our people bled death in the mountains of Afghanistan so you can live free from the Cold War. You never fought. You were cowards. 50 years, you never shot a fucking... You never shot anything at the Russians.
What are you talking about?
We destroyed the Soviet Union in Afghanistan from 1979 to 1989. We bled them to death. We destroyed them and destroyed the Soviet Union. You
also bled yourselves to death too.
But we defeated the power that keep every time your children have to run under chairs because they're scared of a nuclear holocaust. We did that. Don't put us down. We're great fighters. Look at our history. We defeated 3 empires in 2 decades: the Byzantine Empire, the Roman Empire, and the Persian Empire. And we only had slippers. We didn't even have shoes. Imagine if we had shoes. We probably wouldn't. What are you talking about? Don't put us down, my friend. We are not cowards.
No, you're right. You're not. You're right that you're not cowards. You definitely are not cowards.
Yeah.
You nailed that.
Yeah,
it's not just about the military supremacy, though. It's not just about the military supremacy, though. It's more that like it's whether or not Israel can actually achieve their goals. So in 2006, they definitely had military supremacy, but their goal was to get rid of Hezbollah and consolidate the Lebanese army.
They ran away though.
Total failure. It was sluggish. There were booby traps. They couldn't handle the fucking tunnel networks. And Hamas have a very sophisticated tunnel network in Gaza. I'm not very good at military stuff, but I'd imagine one of the most densely populated areas on Earth is going to be one of the hardest places to launch a ground. Yeah, it's going to be one of the hardest places to do a successful ground invasion, right? Like with
hold on. I just want to tell you, and I kind of want to prepare the audience for what's going to happen over the next 6 months to a year. Okay, I think that there's going to be Israeli ground forces that go into Gaza. I just think it has to happen in order for them to eradicate Hamas. I think that when they take a single bullet from an apartment building, they're not going to fire back at the single window that they think it is. They're going to fire machine gun rounds into every single window that's around them. And then they're going to call in an airstrike onto the building. So this cuts both ways. You can say that urban fighting is difficult. Nobody is going to disagree with you. You can say the tunnel complexes are complex. Nobody's going to disagree with you. But what I'm telling you is, the average Israeli soldier is not going to individually clear these areas with grenades and flashbangs. What they're going to do is they're going to do what the United States did, by the way, which is jihadists get into under 200 yards. They get into a firefight. It gets a little hot. They call in airstrikes, and then the jihadists fuck off. And if there's dead civilians, there's dead civilians.
What are you talking
Yeah,
about?
I'm just saying though.
do you
I'm
clear
just
out
saying
the
that
civilians without injuring them?
Loner,
hold
no,
on.
no, no, no. You
One
hold
second,
on.
one
Omar,
minute.
stop. Loner,
Alright.
Dylan.
Yeah,
then
I'm just
Omar.
saying though, like again, I'm not going to be like try to say they're 1-to-1, but what happened in Lebanon again was Hezbollah lost a lot more than Israel did in terms of military equipment and lives and all that. But the problem was that the goal was to just eradicate them, and Nasrallah's goal was just to not die.
ran
And
Is
away.
Hamas going to
also-
be able to
and
replenish
also-
Ran
their
away
forces?
like
and also,
cowards.
I'm
They're
sorry, I just
cowards.
want to try to finish a fucking sentence. Okay. But also just the fact that they were able to weaponize what Israel was doing in Lebanon, i.e., killing a lot of civilians. And then that was part of the Hezbollah's propaganda campaign to gain more support. So they gained support from the Christians, they gained support from the fucking Druze, and even like Sunnis. So yeah, like that's, and I worry that maybe. If they can't wipe out Hamas completely, because their leadership's not even in Gaza, they're in Qatar,
See the
that they might radicalize more
Hold on.
people in the fucking West Bank and other civilians in
Okay,
Gaza. I don't know.
I hear you. Hold on, I hear you, and I think the West Bank and everything that you said is perfectly accurate, perfectly legitimate, et cetera, et cetera. What I would say is geographically different about this, or at least what I think is geographically different, is if Egypt keeps the border closed, and if this is the largest open air prison, I've heard that repeated dozens of times over the past month, then at this point, where are reinforcements coming from? If there's an enforced border, where is the fuel coming from? Where are the bullets coming from? Where's the food coming from? Where's the water
Mostly
coming
tunnels.
from? But for tunnels to where? Egypt, the place that's trying to maintain the blockade,
There are
or
currently
Israel, the
tunnels.
place that's doing
how
it?
Iran smuggles weapons into Gaza. It's through tunnel systems. A lot of them extremely
Okay.
long range.
Okay,
they
do you,
buy
so
they buy
they're
weapons
just
from
gonna
Israelis. With
You're
the Israeli
reinforced with
mafia.
Rybar. Probably have steel doors at the
Counterpoints.
entrances. You're gonna have to
It's
clear it out
also
with troops.
IDF last went into Gaza, what, 2014? Like the amount of time they've had to booby trap the place, it's going to be fucking insane. Shit.
The Israelis,
Well,
the Israeli
I'm not
mafia sells
disagreeing there.
weapons. The Israeli mafia sells weapons to the Palestinians, believe it or not. Criminals, they have this idea. They have no loyalty to nation. What I was going to say, oh my gosh, what I was going to say. I lost my thoughts. You just go ahead, guys. I don't know, man.
I was just going to say, I think if the United States is backing Israel the way they're backing Ukraine, if they give them billions of dollars, if they give them high explosives, if they give them
Ready.
bunker busters, if they give them all that kind of stuff, then I think Gaza's
Oh,
fucked.
Do you really
Oh,
think that
okay, yeah,
Israel
yeah.
will? Do you really think that Israel will need that though? Because Israel did like
Depends
defeat,
on how
like,
hard they
several
fight back.
Yeah, well, they did defeat like several countries around them, like within like 7 days, right, or 6 days. So I don't know. I feel
Because
like
of
they
technological
might.
supremacy.
no,
They
because the
may
United
like if they can
States.
do that. If they can do that with other countries around them, then why wouldn't they be able to just do that with Gaza?
So start. This is what Lonerbox is saying and Dylan is saying, and I want to give plenty of space for what they're saying because I think it's
Mhm.
true that counterinsurgency warfare versus national level warfare are two different things. What happens is national level forces engage with each other, they inflict incredible damage to each other, and then eventually one party says, I'm tired of sending my young people into the meat grinder, I've had enough, I'm done. When it comes to counterinsurgency, basically what you're talking about is not being able to identify who the enemy is, logistics and spy networks and basically like militia networks that can operate for decades. Part of the reason why I'm taking what Loner and Dylan's are saying into account is because I think the geography and the small amount of territory is going to play to Israel's favor. But Loner and Dylan actually have historical examples like, Afghanistan, like Iraq, like Lebanon.
Fallujah.
Like,
That's true.
yeah,
I
well,
will
but
agree.
Fallujah
Afghanistan
isn't a
is one
great
of those
example because that was one where
Yeah,
Fallujah isn't a
actually-
great example because
actually-
that's where a national level military went in and killed everybody. So I actually think it's going to
Yeah.
be more like Fallujah than it is going to be like Lebanon or
You had to
Iraq
give
or
out money
Afghanistan.
in Fallujah.
Well, the rebels in Fallujah had like a few months to build up defenses. I mean, I don't even know how long. We're talking about 30 years of defenses and tunnel networks that they didn't have Fallujah. In Fallujah, they like busted in the walls between the buildings, but they don't have the tunnel networks they have in Gaza.
Dylan, they
And
give
again,
out
and also,
money. They give out money
I
to
just
stop
want to
them from
quickly
fighting.
say that I feel like part of the reason that this happened in southern Israel in the first place is because the Mossad and Netanyahu's government, to a small extent, kind of underestimated Hamas, and Hamas tricked them in their intelligence network. Up until a few weeks ago, the consensus was that Hamas didn't want another war. They weren't planning to do anything like this, and now the intelligence officials believe that the communications that they heard to believe that was actually fake and done by Hamas specifically to trick the Israelis. And the training operations where they made kibbutzes on the border that they raid, like fake Israeli villages where Hamas was training and raiding, where they were practicing on paragliders. There's no way the Mossad didn't know about it. But they underestimated Hamas, and now we have the most deadly day in Jewish history since the Holocaust. And the last thing I want to do is underestimate. If it's not like Hamas didn't anticipate the day that Israel would walk in if they were actually able to pull this off successfully. And they're not the only party involved here. Iran is going to have a field day with this. It is Iran's national security priority of the mullahs to push Israel into the sea. Now, whether they mean that they're going to do that literally any day, I doubt they'll ever will. But their national security priority is to undermine Israel. That's one of their main priorities.
That is the next question I had.
To do it.
Just real quick, real quick before anyone else goes. That is the next question I had, and what I wanted to bring up next to talk about is the responsibility that the other countries that have funded Hezbollah, and some would say funded and supplied Hamas, such as Iran. What responsibility do we have? Does Iran gain from this, and how? And what should, if any, be the international response? I know Stardust wanted to go, and then Omar wanted to go. So we're going to go in, and then we'll.
I go.
Stardust and Omar.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, let Omar go.
Okay, Omar first.
Well, Iran is the one who's giving them the weapons and sponsoring them, because all the Sunni countries have made peace with Israel. So, but how does Iran benefit? Iran's benefit by keeping Israel busy with other problems while they could build those nuclear weapons or keep the eye off it. The reason they don't attack Iran, because Iran has ballistic missiles. Remember, they attacked Iraq because Iraq had nothing. They didn't have no fucking nuclear weapons. Imagine they were looking for weapons of mass destruction inside the palace. What, he had them under the bed? That's the reason. Iran is a very the Persians have 1,000-year history. They're not some starters or in the Middle East. They know. They've been isolated for 50 years, but they have a missile capability. They could hit Tel Aviv anytime they want to. So Iran is safe. Nobody's going to hit Iran. And Iran, the only reason Iran is doing this is Iran has created a lot of problems in Yemen, in my country. They have a militia in Syria, in Lebanon, and now Hamas. Every country they have destabilized, even my native country, because they want to negotiate to get out of the isolation they're in. We're going to cause all this headache. We're going to make the neighborhood bad. We're going to write graffiti all over the place until you come, we sit down, and you take the sanction away from our country, and we could live as a normal nation. That's what Iran's objectives are in the Middle East.
$100 in chat from Lex Friedman. Thanks for hosting debates on this topic, Wick. Great work. Well, thank you. Appreciate it.
Wick.
Yeah.
The real Lex?
The real Lex?
I'm pretty sure it's a real Lex, but
it looks like it. $100. That's good, man.
Yeah, thank you. But I know the rest of you. I'm curious to hear from you. Iran. How does it benefit? Do we think that it was involved in the planning of this attack?
No.
You don't think so?
I mean, like, obviously they funded, right? That's fine. It just depends on who you are and like where you're coming from, what perception. It's split pretty 50-50. If you're Arab, Muslim, or pro-Palestine, chances are this benefited Iran in your eyes. And the other side, just they end up getting hatred from the other side. That's really all it is, just a 50-50 split.
I think the idea of one of the big reasons Hamas might have done, and Hezbollah said this, was that they were really annoyed about Saudi Arabia pursuing normalization talks with Israel. And one of the conditions that Saudi Arabia put on Israel was that they wanted some kind of like move forward with Palestinians, and now that's set that back completely. So it's going to put a wedge in between those relations. The Middle East is a bit different from how they were in the 60s, though. I think the US and Qatar have already blocked like $6 billion in funding from Iran. So, and Iran's got so many internal issues as well, right, with all the women's rights shit. So sorry.
Do we think? Counterpoints, please.
Yeah. So I mean, I'm just trying to I used to work in logistics, so I'm just trying to think of it from a logistics perspective. And when I'm looking around this, okay, I understand Iran can fund people. Okay, you can send money electronically, you can send cash. It's something that you can smuggle, et cetera, et cetera. But when I'm looking at the map of the Gaza Strip, it's on the western side. It's in the Mediterranean. Its largest neighbor is Israel. Its second largest neighbor is Egypt. You would have to talk about looking at this, we're talking about you'd have to have an 80-mile tunnel system out to Jordan and Saudi Arabia. And correct me if I'm wrong, like these tunnel systems aren't exactly like, Jordan and Saudi Arabia, last I checked, aren't particularly sympathetic to Iran. So I'm not saying that you can't get contraband. I'm not saying that you're not going to be coming back to me in 6 months and saying, hey, Connor, you're an idiot. Here's some, Iranian militias. Here's some IRGC sneaking in weapons into Gaza. But again, I'm just landing back on the geography. I think Gaza is fucked. Then when it comes to like Iran's responsibility, it is hard. I think what the empowered man just said is one of the problems. Is Iran was one of the major players up until the 70s. We relied on the twin pillar diplomatic system up until the 1970s, where we were reliant on Iran for geopolitical security. So having them be an enemy or an opponent is a massive thorn in Israel's side and our side. So how far they go with it, I don't know, though, because it's you're talking about an existential dice roll to the point that they could start World War III.
Here's a question. Do you think Egypt will help Israel enforce the blockade when it comes to the smuggling routes between Egypt and Israel? Because there's a lot of the smuggling routes are from Egypt and Israel.
Yeah.
I mean,
Legally,
Egypt and the Gaza Strip.
legally, yes, but
Honestly, it
underground, yeah.
looks like it's 50-50. And I think if the Israelis control Gaza, they could effectively threaten the Egyptians, where they say, like, if you keep letting weapons into Gaza, we are going to open the border and let tens of thousands of Palestinians into your territory. So yeah, I think Israel has some leverage to get Egyptians to cooperate.
Could Israel just let all the Palestinians into Egypt and Egypt couldn't
No,
stop them?
the Egyptian president just spoke earlier. I was watching the Arabic news, Al Jazeera, and he warned. He said the Palestinian people, don't move from your homes. They're going to try to ethnically cleanse you because you're not going to come back. And the king of Jordan said the same thing. You stay on your land, and they're not going to let him go. Because
Why
everybody
do
knows
we
what-
think? Why do we think that Jordan and Egypt wouldn't want the people of Gaza?
I would
they don't want
assume
the
that
headache.
They're not going to come back.
it's
They're
got
gonna
fear
do-
from
yeah.
the Black September War and certain like history there. But I mean, Egypt probably has some of the same. They're I think mostly feared about like fearful of Hamas infiltration and probably having to support the refugees.
No,
The
they
Egyptian
can't-
government is unbelievably brutal.
They can't come back. Israel will not let them come back no more. This is
Well, empowered man, you
Well, no,
keep
it's
saying
not-
that like
wait,
it's a
let's-
humanitarian
let's not
concern.
pretend that
Like
the Egyptian government, through the kindness of their heart, are not letting people flee into
No.
Egypt.
They don't.
Yeah,
it's
they
not-
don't
it's
want
not
Palestinians,
humanitarian.
It
and
beats the
they don't-
purpose.
if
That's
they
the whole
wanted
objective of the
Palestinians
war.
Shouldn't
They
wait?
don't-
Shouldn't we allow? Wait. Shouldn't it be up to individual Palestinians whether they choose to leave or go and choose a
No.
safer option? No, so
Wait,
they have to be
no?
forced to stay in Gaza
Shoot him in the
to
head.
fight
Anybody
against
leave, shoot him in the
Israel.
head.
That is no, it's just
Hold
a
on.
national
No.
suicide
What?
pact.
Wait, hold on.
What?
Stop. Omar,
Anybody
what did you just say?
leaves-
Hold on. Stop.
Anybody leaves toward Egypt, shoot him in the head. That's a traitor. Don't give up your land. You've already been running
You
for
are
70.
like, are you
Hold
fucking
on,
like
hold on,
terrorist?
hold
This
on,
is like
hold on,
terrorist,
hold on.
like
Hold
crazy
on, hold
shit.
on, hold
This is
on.
like terrorism
Hold
shit.
on,
Like,
hold
what
on,
the
hold
fuck
on,
are you
hold on.
saying?
Let me finish. They've been running over for 75 years. They've been running from place to place.
Can we even platform this?
I
They-
actually
No,
don't
I
know,
think
Omar.
like no.
There's
This is
no
we can
place.
platform this on Twitch.
Omar,
Stay on
I'm
your
sorry,
land
buddy.
to the Palestinian. If you hear me,
You're saying to shoot Palestinians
Okay.
and then saying the
Omar,
Israelis
I
are
don't-
being.
Omar,
don't mean
I
it
can't let you.
literally.
I can't let you
mean
do
it.
this.
I don't mean it literally.
I'm sorry.
What a fucking
I couldn't
psycho,
believe what he
man.
just said. Yeah.
I didn't mean
the
to get
Hamas
that out of
opinion, by
him.
the way.
Oh my
Sorry.
god.
That's
Well,
the radical
well-
Hamas opinion, by the way. They think that Palestinians who live in Israel and don't rise up are like traitors, right?
Yeah.
They think Lebanese refugees who try to get citizenship or try to buy a house are traitors. Yeah.
So hold up. So Ali, this is like this has kind of been my beef, right? So on one hand, I'm willing to concede like descriptive reality to you, like all day, like just Israel's doing like a slow rolling move in order to gain more and more territory, kick Palestinians off their land. If they could do it without killing them, they probably would, but ultimately they don't care. Their political goal is to expand their territory, et cetera, et cetera. Like, you can look at the rhetoric versus looking at the actual geopolitical change over the past 100 years, and it's pretty obvious what's going on. But then you have somebody like the Empowered Man who says that if refugees are fleeing their own territories, then they should be killed as traitors. And I'm like, and I hate to say it because obviously it's bigoted or racist or whatever, but like, fuck that, and
Yeah.
fuck people who think like that.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, like, I don't think you're actually sympathetic to the humanitarian needs of the people on the ground. I think you just view this as a proxy war to stick your finger in the eye of the Western world and of Israel in general. So as a result, it's not about the people, it's about sticking your finger in the eye.
Yeah, so I think what happens is like it's like a weird level of like patriotism, right? So if you take what happened in like Israel, Palestine, right, and apply it to like America, for example, if we gave the indigenous people their own land and they claimed it as a state, and then that state started to expand, and then the Americans within that state were being like oppressed or whatever, and then those Americans committed the same act that Hamas committed, I don't think Americans would call them terrorists, right? And I think that's what ends up being like the weird issue is that the way we view certain people is from the lens of like, okay, well, we're in America.
I think
we
that's
would never...
bullshit, Ollie, and I'll tell you why.
I know.
Yeah.
I think that if you had Americans, right, in any situation, in any context, going in and burning babies and killing and raping men, women, and children, we would denounce that as barbaric, savage, and gross. And no one would support, at least on the government level, right? There would probably be crazies, right? But at least on the government level, no one would endorse that. No one would back it. No one would support it.
I'm not so sure about that, but
I was about to say, I don't think that's true, man. I think that's like the level of the people that you agree with and you see yourself with, right? So if you see Americans being oppressed, you feel like they're being ethnically cleansed, whatever it is, and then they do an attack like that. I'm not condoning the attack. What I'm saying is that you would have more empathy with those people because you relate to them.
I lose all my empathy as soon as you kill a baby.
I'm just saying.
Wait,
I'm just saying though.
Could I pose like a hypothetical? I want to pose a hypothetical. Okay, I think like to make this a little bit more analogous. Let's say there's like an area like a city maybe that has a high immigrant population, and then there's like a couple of like there's like a small group of people who have opposition to those people coming in and becoming a majority there. And let's say that small group of people, commits an act of that kind. I think like across the board, we would all be very, very like
I'm right down the middle.
In the United States, we have people who go into fucking pizza parlors and make up bullshit like conspiracy theories, shoot bullets in the roof in order to stop oppression that's not even fucking happening, right? So the idea that somebody like Marjorie Taylor Greene, who last week was saying that the Ukrainians are like harvesting baby organs in order to fund their war effort, that she wouldn't be in the American version of Hamas, like leading it forward if we were in a comparable situation to the Palestinians? No, I absolutely don't.
Marjorie Taylor Greene is cheating, okay? She's an exception, right? That's cheating. Okay, that's cheating.
No, hold on. No, I think we hold up. So I think what we need to realize, is that we are at least for me, like, I'm not a religious literalist. I still find like a lot of value in religion, but I'm not a religious literalist. I think that the morality that you're talking about is actually pretty common in the 19th century and common in the 19th century United States of America. If you looked at the way that we treated indigenous people or whatever, it's like they're savages, the only good Indian is a dead Indian, all that kind of stuff. Like we effectively did genocides here. And then even if it wasn't like a physical genocide, it was a cultural genocide where we said the only way that we can have these people as a part of our society is if we civilize them, is if we make them become Christian, adopt our names, adopt our religion, adopt our language, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't think we're, that many generations removed from morally participating in this thing. That being said, I think what differentiates us from this now is that, like, in the past 50 years, I think through technology, through social media, through liberal values, through the internet, through globalism, all that kind of stuff, we realize that that shit is fucking evil. And so what happens when you have people explain the thought process of genocide or the thought process of mass slaughter, it sounds like excuses, it sounds like apologia, and it sounds like justification. And so that's where I think that the pushback is coming from, even from me, because if you show me Hamas, butchering like entire people in the kibbutz, and you're like, well, they were there, they were colonizers. Colonizers aren't civilians or whatever. What that does to me is it jettisons my capacity for empathy. And I hope the IDF goes into Gaza and kills every member of Hamas, because that they supported and made it a policy to actively kill civilians. As a result, that's morally incompatible with the way I view the world. They have to be destroyed. Yeah.
Last question before we kind of wrap this up. I'm not sure if I want to take calls on this one, to be honest with you.
Wait, as well. So with my analogy, would you agree or you disagree on how that would work out?
No, sorry, real quick. I'll be quick, Wick. No, I agree with you. I think that the vast majority of us, like including like Wick and all that kind of stuff, would be like, fuck that. They don't represent us. They're pieces of shit. I condemn them wholeheartedly. They're fucking assholes. And as a matter of fact, you have my wholehearted support to fuck them over. But I do think that the closer physical proximity you have to that area, you would find sympathizers and you would find people who logistically and financially supported them.
And that's
just saying as well
that was just the explanation to the empowered man. So there are people who obviously are never going to see it as like a two-way problem. There's always going to be one. Like they're always going to be pro one side. Obviously, I'm pro the Palestinian side, but I understand that the issues come from both, and then there's just more nuance than simply picking.
Loner, go ahead.
I'm just saying that for all the suffering that Palestinians have gone through for the last 75 years, like even it seems when you look at polling, most of the time, most of them don't support it either, right? So even during the Second Intifada, most Palestinians opposed the suicide bombings. The most popular leader in Palestine to this day is not Hamas. It's not a terrorist. It's Barghouti, right? He's and he's said in the 2000s that he opposed attacking civilians in Israel because no good will come from killing our future neighbors, right? That was his position. So same with apartheid, same with the majority of Black Americans in the civil rights movement opposed violence. So it's funny that they can go through all that and still have like more humane positions than all these fucking white leftist retards.
I feel like the only reason typically that they're opposed to violence is because they know that the outcome isn't going to be good for them, right? So if like Palestinians endorse the violence, the outcome just isn't going to be good. Israel's way more militarized than they are. They have more money, they have more funding. So obviously the people are never going to support that. But what happens is you have people that want freedom, and then you have this group of people that's willing to do something about it. And although we like the acts are horrific, sure, from the outside world, we're seeing it as like, this is what's the alternative? The alternative is letting the other thing happen, right?
Okay.
Well, hold up. So
you need to also acknowledge, though, to a certain extent, Hamas has made it so there is no alternative. They have suppressed dissent. They have gone after. I'm just reinforcing this. After gangs, stolen aid, hasn't held an election since 2006, and they could have held elections since 2006. They cracked down on any forming of a civil society in the Gaza Strip that could offer an alternative solution outside of what we just saw in southern Lebanon. And I do think that for Palestinians to move forward in the flourishing of making a state either after a peace deal is done or even better before a peace deal, Hamas going would be a positive thing for the development of Israeli-Palestinian relations and the creation of a two-state solution.
I mean, that's an assumption, but I don't know if that's how it works out necessarily.
Yeah, but before we wrap up, I just want to... Sorry, go ahead.
Okay, I still got one more question that's very important to ask, but before we wrap up, I want Stardust and Counterpoints, and then I do want to ask my question. So,
I was looking at also some polling as far as like Hamas. I know Hamas is like involved in a lot of government and operations and political operations and security operations within Palestine, but like according to polling, I'm seeing that even like a third of Palestinians consider Hamas one of the most like damaging developments for their people. So I think that's important too. Also, kind of keep in mind.
You can even when they won the election, I think most of them said that their reason for voting for Hamas was not to do with militancy. It was to do with corruption, because the PA were notoriously corrupt, whereas Hamas had a good reputation from the charity with Mujama al-Islamiyah, right? They've always got that veneer of being religious and noble, even though they are corrupt. But
Counterpoints,
Okay,
and then my
and
question.
yeah, real quick point. So I'm happy when Lonerbox said like, oh well, we haven't seen anything from our side like this, in the past like whatever amount of years. Like, I'm happy that you later brought up Sabra and Shatila, which was basically like Christian Phalanges militias that were in Lebanon that then massacred a couple of cities, allegedly with IDF support. And then also the United States got wrapped in because we were covering the retreat of IDF forces from Lebanon, and that was part of the justification for bin Laden. So what I'm saying is like, it's easy for me to say like, oh yeah, the IDF is going to go fuck up Gaza. That doesn't mean that we're not starting the cycle of violence that's going to lead to another 9/11 and another global war on terror. So we have to be really serious about what's happening now because it's going to start the next cycle of violence.
So, given that, to kind of fast forward everything, to recognize that we live in the now, in a very real sense. Now we are in a situation, regardless of fault, regardless of anything else, where an organization, Hamas, has came in and again massacred over 1,200 people, civilians, men, women, children. What should, not what will, right? Because I know you like to focus on the will, and we focus on the will. What should the Israeli response be? Because in my mind, any response short of the entire dismantling of Hamas just isn't going to cut it. I think Hamas at this point needs to go. Am I okay with what Netanyahu is doing in response? Absolutely not. But that does beg the question, what should they do? And I'm curious what everyone's answer here. So go ahead.
So like what should happen, probably will never happen, is that both parties, the IDF, the Israeli government, and the Hamas should be able to look at the atrocities that have happened and be able to come to an agreement and have a conversation going forward. That's what should
Wait, does Hamas get to be a part of that conversation after what they did?
I mean, does the IDF get to be part of that conversation? Yeah.
Okay.
You guys, you got to understand, I see
answer.
the IDF and the Israeli government the same way you guys see Hamas. So yes, both parties need to come to mutual agreements. I mean, you can sigh all you want, but
Israel has a state. Hamas doesn't. It's also like, I don't know. Like what?
Yeah, Israel having a state is part
the
of
Hamas charter is about like it's literally in the Hamas charter like that they want to free Palestine of all the Jews.
I mean,
it's
okay,
not
but
quite
then
the same.
Isn't it part of the Israeli charter that
Hamas
they want to get rid of all the Palestinians? What's the
no, wait, I'm sorry. When has Hamas ever elected a leader or had the potential to elect a leader who believes in peace? Israel can do that, right? They've had Rabin, like they can do that. Hamas can't.
Because
Hamas is directed by fucking Iran.
Comfortably able to do that.
So you think Hamas
Palestinians don't really have a choice?
So you think Hamas could get a leader who is pro-peace?
The question was what should happen, not what will happen. What should happen is that they should be able to find a leader that is for peace. Yes.
So what should happen is that Hamas abolishes their charter and cuts ties with Iran and becomes a pro-peace party, right?
I don't know if you have to cut ties with Iran, but you can still be a pro-peace party.
You think Iran would support Hamas if they were pro-peace?
I mean, once again, this is what should and what will. So these are two different. I'm getting two different questions.
Okay, you're leaning really hard on the should, as in idealistic world. Let's.
Yeah, that's. I mean, obviously that was the question. You said not what will happen.
Yeah.
What should happen?
That's literally what the question was.
You're right. Maybe I phrased the question poorly. I just didn't think we were going to go into fantasy land where what should happen is the aliens should come down and turn us all into good people. The dragons should come up and make peace with the fairy elves. Come on! You know what I mean when I say should. You know what I mean.
No, you disagree with him because of the way he morally views them.
So Whick, if I can, maybe we can rephrase the question as in like within what
reason as it stands on the ground now. Let me ask this. Let me try this. As the facts on the ground stand now, okay? Now, today, what should Israel's response be?
I mean, I can go if you want me to go.
Yeah, someone, please.
Yeah, okay. So what should / will be Israel's response? They should stop the airstrikes immediately unless it's against a purely military target. They shouldn't do the there's a residential area around this target. I know that eliminates 99% of their airstrikes, but it just is what it is. Then what I would say, you're nodding your head, you're not going to agree with the rest of what I say. Then I would say Sending ground forces, anybody who shoots at you, you do counterinsurgency warfare. You take them all out. You disband Hamas. You go after their insurgency network. You go after anybody who's logistically supporting them, et cetera, kill or capture all of them. You militarily occupy Gaza. But then what you have to do, because what we're talking about cycles of violence, is you have to view Gaza as a nation building project on par with what you would do for Jewish citizens of Israel. So you have to have a desalinization plant. You have to have water. You have to have access to stable electricity. You have to have access to education. You have to have access to secondary education. You have to have the ability to travel and all that kind of stuff. And I know that the what would be the impetus, or not the impetus, the impulse would be for violence and revenge. Let's keep these people as subservient slave animals living in rubble and let them all fester and die, and who gives a shit if they're educated, and who gives a shit if they have clean water? Don't you remember these massacres? That's going to be the impulse. But I think that you can appeal to a utilitarian framework with Israel and say, what is going to end the bloodshed? And what's going to end the bloodshed is prosperous, healthy, ambitious Gazans who have a different priority than killing Jews. And if you're not down with that, then you're probably wrong.
Where would I disagree with you?
Probably with the military rolling in and killing everybody who shoots at them.
That's part of the war, man. Like, I understand that that's a side that
Are ground invasions not typically more deadly than airstrikes?
They probably are, but at the same time, what you're talking about the morality of just dropping bombs kind of willy-nilly, and then who it kills is who it kills, versus individual soldiers making the choice. And I understand that, like, having individual soldiers making the choice opens it up to massacre, because then, you know, one of your friends gets shot and then you're just like, fuck all these people, and then you just machine gun a crowd. But you're also capable of holding those people accountable. So then it becomes a moral calculus of actually separating the combatants from the non-combatants.
The one thing that really makes me hesitant about any ground invasion, or the idea that this would be a long-term solution, is I do not believe that the current government of Israel is at all interested in what you just laid out. Interested in developing a state in the Gaza Strip that would address the needs of Palestinians and make them think that the type of violence that Hamas engaged in, not only are they not in favor of it, they would never even have that type of thought pass their mind. I don't think that that's what the Israeli government wants. I don't think they're going to engage in that type of a ground campaign. And for that reason, I have to oppose that type of a ground campaign. And I can't be in favor of it. I'm in favor of the people who killed civilians in southern Israel, every single one of them being brought to justice, and the people who planned and operated it being brought to justice, either through special forces raids or finding out where they are and killing them with civilian casualties limited as much as possible. Because you got to make sure that the response to this isn't literally, well, it happened, I guess it is what it is. Not only would that be a terrible incentive for terrorist organizations, but it also would meet with immense backlash from Israeli society and make it so if they're like, well, if you won't deal with it, we'll put in somebody we know for sure will deal with it. And it'll probably be some crazy-ass far-right radical. But I don't think a ground operation necessarily is going to lead to the eradication of Hamas. Everybody's viewing it like Hamas are a bunch of fish in the barrel. But if they get in the tunnel system and evacuate and go into exile like they have before, and we have good reason to know that these types of organizations have ties all across the globe for places they go and hide in, that Hamas's leadership is in Lebanon. They have leadership in Qatar. They have leadership all over the world. How do we know that it's not just going to be Hamas goes into exile, Hezbollah fights with Israel for 20, 30 years, and now it's going to be a long-term counterinsurgency campaign that solves nothing but just adds a bunch of bodies, like the invasion of southern Lebanon?
Well, given that that's the reality on the ground, given that that's true, right? A lot of Hamas leadership isn't even in Gaza, right? Is this fixable? Is this solvable?
Not unless you kind of go with the solution that I was talking about. Also, the other thing about the West Bank too, I think you have to freeze. I don't expect Israel to withdraw settlements. I really don't. But I think you have to freeze building of settlements in the West Bank, and you basically have to tell them you're not getting IDF support, you're not getting your internet hooked up, you're not getting your water hooked up, you're not getting your electricity, and you're not getting the protection of the Israeli state. So if you go outside of our borders, you're on your own and you're fucked. So I think that's what it would take. I don't think Israel's have the spine for that either, but that's what it would take, is a freezing to the borders if you want a two-state solution. Then when it comes to what Dylan said with like, well, how do we know that Hezbollah is not going to go international and just, kind of stay on the fringes? I'm
Hamas?
sure. Oh, sorry. Yeah, thank you. Hamas. How do we know Hamas isn't going to go international? I think Israel's probably going to ask the United States, because I think it's a little bit less dicey for American special forces to be in Arab countries than it is for Israeli special forces to be in Arab countries. They're probably going to ask for us to conduct special forces raids on their behalf and just say that, like, oh, we thought it's Al Qaeda or we thought it's ISIS or whatever, but actually it was Hamas. And then also, I think that if you've seen, I think the movie was called Munich. It's where like a series of Jewish assassins basically travel internationally in order to take out the leaderships who were behind the Olympic assassinations. I expect Israel to do something like that, which they have done recently. They did that with the Iranian nuclear physicists.
Do we think the Biden administration is going to possibly put American lives in risk to engage in these types of raids across the Middle East, as we're seeing the government largely pivot from its over a decade long Middle East strategy and have reeled back in deployments?
Well, as far as I know, we've been in CT plus for a while, which was like Obama's thing, which is like counterterrorism plus. It's viewing terrorism as like a law enforcement issue, and I think that it's entirely possible that, I mean, board. I'm being really cold right now, but I'm just going to be cold. Board special forces don't want to spend 4 years on a contract not deploying and not stacking bodies. So U.S. SOCOM is probably begging the president of the United States to be taken off leash in reference to this.
I want to get a start.
Being active. I mean, there's a question about being active in certain regions like Syria, which is going to be a lot easier for American special operation forces to engage in, because everybody and their mom can intervene in Syria in the region. There is no the government of Assad has butchered his own people endlessly and has made it so he doesn't.
Yeah, I don't think you're going to be able to do this in Oman.
Well, when we talk about like places
Arabia.
like Qatar, yeah, that's my question. Is we're not going to put U.S. special forces in Qatar, are we?
No, but that's where I would expect a similar situation in Munich, where maybe a couple of people get car bombed and they weren't expecting it. And just to be like, just to be ultra clear, like what I'm talking about. So I know it's a film, but it's allegedly based on real events where Israel did do reprisal assassinations for the Munich Olympic Games in which their Olympic team was killed. And also we have information as recent as I want to say like 2008 or 2011, where a moped in Iran drove up alongside a nuclear physicist in Iran who was working on the nuclear program, and they basically strapped a magnetic explosive to his driver's side door and killed him. So I don't think it's beyond Mossad or Israeli special forces capacity to conduct extrajudicial assassinations of organizations that they believe to be terrorists.
I'm sympathetic to the fact that the Mossad is an extremely effective organization, but also it was also the Mossad that failed to stop what just happened in southern Israel. And so while I do believe that Mossad has an immense capacity, it is up in the air if after this policy of just like perpetuating the conflict that Netanyahu is engaged in, that their government could engage in these types of raids in countries that will be expecting these types of raids.
The historical parallel that I would cite to you is the CIA. So basically pre 9/11, they went to a lot of like signals intelligence, a lot of human intelligence people were saying like, we need to be on the ground. We need to be talking to people. We need to have a better network. We need to do this. We need to do that. They were basically ignored by the administration. And as a result, 9/11 was viewed as an intelligence failure. I think people still call 9/11 an intelligence failure to this day. And yet since that date, CIA has been infinitely more kinetic. They've gone on the field. They have the Special Activities Division. They work with the drone program. They work with special forces all the time. So I get what you're saying, where maybe they failed in their capacity now. I'm not going to lie, guys. Maybe this is like too unnuanced. I view this as Israel's version of 9/11. We are a population of 320 million. I think we've been 250 million plus since before 2001. We lost 3,000 people to 9/11. Israel just lost 1,000, and I'm pretty sure they're a country of only a few million. This is going to go really close. It's going to cut really deep to the bone, and they're going to kill a lot of fucking people because of it.
And on that note, gang, this has been a discussion. I apologize for the toss thing earlier. We dealt with that. It is what it is. Whoa! I want to check the temperature here. Are we going to take calls for this, or are we not? What are we thinking? What do we want?
I got to take care of family, honestly.
Okay. We probably, yeah, that's kind of my thinking. I don't know if I want to bring people on to scream and yell about this. So that's what we're going to do. Gang, if you like this content, if you've enjoyed this discussion, if you, like Lex Friedman, love Whick, then consider supporting the channel by liking and subscribing if you're watching on YouTube. If you're on Twitch or you're on Kick, follow. Give me some subs. Give me some super chats. All that goes to help the channel, and I appreciate you and thank you for tuning in. And I want to say I appreciate all of you for being here, for weighing in, and for mostly being calm, rational, and reasonable.
I do have a question.
Oh, please go ahead.
Before we finish this up, do people on the panel think that that Israel should restore the power and utilities to the Gaza region, or do you think that's too risky for them?
I think they should restore it immediately.
I think they should restore it as well. Yeah. I just don't. I don't know why they.
Human beings can.
Yeah.
Sorry, this is kind of a big deal.
Yeah.
Human beings can't survive without water for 3 days.
Yeah.
And we're talking
I don't know
about
why
the
they're
desert.
doing that. Yeah.
Well, I know why they're doing it. They don't give a
I know
fuck.
why.
Well, this is the thing that gets me. They're saying they're doing it to, you're gonna go in, you're
Get the
gonna
hostages
destroy Hamas.
released.
But Hamas has years and years and years of bottled water in those tunnels. Hamas has generators, they have fuel stored up. The first people that are gonna be suffering from these utilities getting cut off are going to be working class Palestinians, and the Hamas leadership are gonna be eating duck and good fish, and they're going to be absolutely fine, and the majority of Hamas fighters are going to be able to sustain themselves because they are the priority for Hamas, which is solely right now interested in resisting Israel in every way. And the only way they can do that is if they have fighters with a full stomach, not necessarily a civilian population with a full stomach.
If you want to,
if I could, I think that they should restore the power and the utilities, because I think that not only
water,
are
at
the
least.
average people, at least the water, and not only are the average civilians going to suffer from this. I think restoring those things would probably at least build some goodwill between Israel. I think that for Israel to move forward, I don't know militarily what they should be doing, but I do know Israel moving forward will have to find a way to build a strong relationship with Palestinian civilians. Yeah.
I want to say something that I think is
real quick, then we got to get
critically-
to closings.
Yeah, critically important. I think Israel has a lot of momentum. I've said it before. I've said it again. I think that they have the ability to use international rage at this incident in order to militarily occupy Gaza and maybe even displace most of Gaza to a different location. I think what will absolutely destroy that momentum is if in 2 or 3 days you have Palestinian families walking out with their dead children from dehydration, and they're holding them and they're live streaming it and recording it and uploading it. If you have obviously the kibbutz massacre was horrifying, but if you have tens of thousands of dead children in 3 days because of Israel's direct action, you're going to lose whatever political sympathy you had.
And
I think they've already lost a decent chunk of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They had an opportunity. Too early to tell, but it looks like they're squandering it. Okay, on that note, I want to give everyone here closing thoughts on this and tell people where they can find you if they want to find you. And we're going to start in the reverse order that we started. We're going to start with Stardust. We're going to work our way and let Ali close us out. Stardust, go ahead.
Yeah. So again, I will say that it's a tragedy on both sides. At this point, 70 years on, I don't hold the citizens of Israel responsible for the original situation that led this all to happening. For people who live there, that's all they know. That's the land and the home that they know. Not to make what originally happened right. But if they're going to move forward, Israel and the IDF are going to have to build a pretty strong relationship with Palestinian citizens. If they want a two-state solution, it's not going to work unless they start building that goodwill, and they basically get Palestinian civilians to trust them more than Hamas or any other outside influence. So,
Where can people find you?
I'm Stardust. You can find me twitch.tv/Stardust or youtube.com/Stardust streams.
Thank you for being here. Really appreciate you. Lunderbox, what you got?
Thank you for having me.
I think my take is the same on Dylan's regarding the ground invasion. I think it's probably more likely to cause more harm than good. Assuming it does happen and they occupy Gaza, I mean, I would at least hope that Netanyahu goes, that he gets replaced by someone who is actually pro-peace and is actually serious about peace, like Rabin. If any far-right Israeli wants to take the position that Palestinians can never be negotiated with and there's absolutely no point, well, maybe they should be deported along with them. Like, I don't care. Like, but they can fuck off with like Smotrich and all those other wankers. I think pretty doomer about the whole thing. Maybe like the slightest bit of hopium, even though people are saying that this sets everything back. It probably will. But there was a case in 93, just after 6 years of the first Intifada, where there was quite a lot of violence, a lot of civilian deaths on both sides. And out of that came a pro-peace leader in Palestine who was willing to recognize Israel and denounce terrorism. And on the Israeli side, there was a pro-peace prime minister who was willing to engage in the Oslo Accords. I don't think it's
Until
impossible
they killed him,
that.
but yeah.
Yeah, I know, but I'm just saying that. I'm not saying it's people like underestimate how much will there is on both sides for the suffering to stop, even if it doesn't always show in their leadership or in their kind of like the way their opinions fluctuate based on events. But yeah, who knows?
Where can people find you?
Oh, lonerboxyoutube.com
Thank
and
you.
Twitter.
Thank you for being here. Check them out. I really appreciate you, and I hope you're right with the hopium. Okay, I really do. Dylan, go ahead.
My name is Dylan Burns. I'm a war journalist and streamer on the ground in Ukraine. I just got back from covering the Zaporozhye counteroffensive with artillery teams. I'm going to be releasing that footage probably at somewhere near the end of the month. I got an interview with a Brazilian International Legion fighter. We're going to be releasing probably in the next few days over the weekend. As for this, first thing I want to say, and I didn't get a chance to shout it out, and I don't see a lot of people talking about it, so I'm going to talk about it. There's so much fake footage sharing around on Twitter. Twitter's been the absolutely worst platform in the world for covering this. Facebook's been pretty bad too. Instagram's been pretty bad. Basically, every social media platform's been bad, but Twitter has been the absolute worst. And the thing that really hurts is I have a lot of friends in the Syrian diaspora that fled after Assad started butchering his own people, bombing them with thermite, using chemical weapons against them, bombing them with barrel bombs, butchering all of his people. And I'm seeing so much footage from that war getting reposted and people pretending it's from this war. And I can't imagine being a Syrian person, seeing your suffering ignored for like almost a decade, a literal decade, and then the only time people actually acknowledge your suffering and look at your suffering is when they pretend it's somebody else's suffering, right? I can't even imagine the anger, and all of my Syrian friends are fuming about it, and so I wanted to just say that for a second. I also want to talk about, since I have more experience with this war than I do with the war that's going on right now, I want to talk about how why a lot of the world isn't supporting Ukraine and the international liberal world order is because a lot of it they think is hypocritical. That when Russia violates Ukraine's sovereignty, which obviously Ukraine should be supplied with what is necessary to push back against the Russian invasion, it's illegal, it's horrible, it's awful. But when they get their territory infringed upon, the West all comes together, locks arms, is ready to push back against the Russians. But for the last 80 years of occupation, the West has been largely silent about the Israeli occupation of the West Bank, has been largely silent about Netanyahu's continued perpetuation of the conflict and no interest in coming to a reasonable deal, or any of the horrific statements that have come from Knesset members, government officials, talking about, oh, we need to level the place. We've got American politicians like Lindsey Graham saying we need to level the Gaza Strip. He has never... what connection does he have to this conflict to have that much of a murderous opinion about it? His family wasn't shot and killed. That's the thing that really gets me, is when people who don't even have direct ties to this conflict, or some of the most bloodthirsty people overseas because of either like religious zealotry or because they want to score political points. Those people are the worst. But the only people who I believe that are civilians that are legitimate targets are those who post armor footage on Twitter and pretend that it's real. And that'll be my finishing statement.
Thanks for being here. Yeah, just double check your sources, gang. There's a lot of anger. There's a lot of people trying to use this to get their dunks on. So just check your sources. Make sure that at least it's backed up by something, right? There's a fog of war going on, and yeah, we just got to double check it. Thank you for being here. Appreciate you coming. Counterpoints.
Yep. So I'll try to be brief. Israel is responsible for the geopolitical pressure that's been put on the Palestinians, and as a result, but the Palestinians are responsible for what they do with that pressure. So, as an example, I think that, I just saw some footage of, Hamas like ripping up some water pipes in order to build rockets that they could then shoot into Israel and all that kind of stuff. And it's like, no, that's not going to fucking solve anything. And basically, I would go with my plan if I was Israel. So ground invasion is probably going to happen whether we like it or not. The eradication of Hamas is probably going to happen whether or not we like it. We're probably going to have a 10-year or 20-year military occupation with civilian casualties. And then the only way to break the cycle of violence is to treat your neighbor the way you would like to be treated. And that means not evicting them. That means providing for their water, providing for their security, providing for their education, providing for their future well-being, et cetera, et cetera. And if we don't have the willpower to do that, then we'll just launch a new cycle of violence. If you liked my takes, if you want to check me out, you can type in Counterpoints 40K into YouTube. You'll come across my Warhammer channel. We're breaking 55,000 subscribers, this month. We are also breaking 1 million views monthly for the third or fourth time, which is pretty cool. So if you're into Warhammer animations or Warhammer lore breakdowns, go ahead and check that out. If you want my politics takes, then we're resetting the politics under the channel Counterfire, where debates and conversations such as this are posted. So thank you for having me on, Whick. I appreciate it. Ollie, even if we disagreed or whatever, if we're on different sides of the fence, it was nice speaking with you. And of course, I parasocially love everybody else on this panel as well. So
thank you for being here, Counterpoints. Really appreciate you. Finally, Ollie, go ahead.
Yeah, so I think during these times, it's really important that people stay aware, do your own research, do good research, stay informed, have conversations with people who disagree with you. You shouldn't live in an echo chamber. You should be able to see things from another perspective, another side. Stay hopeful. Free Palestine. And the other way, you can find me, Ali the Sagir, TikTok normally, but I'm about to start streaming relatively soon. Counterpoints, it was a pleasure meeting you, Loner, Dylan, Stardust.
Thank you for being here. Everyone, gang, like I said, we're probably not going to have a stream tomorrow. I might do a solo stream, might do some solo content. I don't know. It depends on how I feel. I have been frustrated by the coverage of this, the response to this. A lot of people have gone mask off, and I think that a lot of people, it just shows that they are willing to overlook the suffering and inhumanity if it is done to the people they consider to be the bad guys. And that is a statement that applies across the board politically. But yeah. Okay, we're going to rate out, and we'll see you guys either tomorrow or we'll see you Monday. Wait, bye-bye, everyone. Bye-bye. Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.